of the Board of Education for October 6, 2020 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening and welcome to tonight's board meeting. We, along with many of our students and families, are anxiously awaiting updates on comprehensive distance learning, racial equity and social justice, and online learning. We all are also anxiously awaiting the election that's coming up. And so I have two board colleagues tonight who are going to give us a little brief snapshot of the bond that is coming before us on the November 3rd ballot. Andrew, are you ready?
Sure, I'll jump. I wasn't sure when this was happening. Yeah, no, so I just want, we do have a very important bond vote coming up in November, and there's been a lot of work going on out there. Board members had either visited in person or did video presentations at back to school nights throughout the district, which I think mine, at least the ones I went to, was generally well received. Got a few questions and definitely a lot of interest and directed people out to the website. I think probably this is going to be a little bit wonky, but that's who I am. One of the most exciting things for me about this bond is that it maintains the momentum that the district has around its infrastructure and infrastructure backlog, and voters very generously increased their taxes in 2012 and 2017. And right now we have the benefit of being able to extend that tax rate in the bond without an increase in taxes and still raise $1.2 billion for very, very needed investments in our schools, in our curriculum, and health and safety, and so forth. So I would encourage voters to find out more. Go to the website, yespdxschools.com. And learn all you can and ask questions and vote for the bond in November.
Dr. Constam, did you have any thoughts to add to that?
Sure. I just wanted to share that this is the third bond campaign that I've worked on as a parent volunteer. Before I was on the board with the 2012 campaign, and then 2017 and now. And one of the things that's really gratifying is that when I've been talking to people, it feels very different because people can see what all those past investments are doing for our communities, or their kids are already experiencing learning in these 21st century schools that have been redone. So it's really exciting to think that, at some point we're going to have invested in our whole portfolio of buildings, and very soon we will have redone all of our high school buildings. So I just wanted to share that aside. And also we have an event coming up in a week with some leaders in the BIPOC community who are really excited about the investments in Jefferson High School and in the Center for Black Student Excellence. So it's really great to see that excitement and that recognition of the importance of those elements in this bond. So we're feeling some momentum, and
the needs of all of our learners.
Hi, anyway. And I think that's all I had to say. Andrew, I'm not sure if he mentioned at the very beginning that we do have lawn signs. So if anybody out there is listening and they want some lawn signs, hit me up. All right, thanks.
Those of you who know where I live, there's a pile in my front yard to pick up. So the yard signs are great. All right, we are going to move forward now with our consent agenda. There was a change to the consent agenda. Resolution 6186 will be voted on after the consent agenda. So are there any other changes or are there any other items that people would like to pull from the consent agenda tonight? All right, Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
All right, do I have a motion and second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, Director Constam moves and Director DePass seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda?
I just have a short comment to make about the contracts on the agenda tonight. At the last couple board meetings, I've raised raised some issues about some of the contracts that we've had primarily sort of the formatting and the information contained. And I just want to acknowledge that working this past week with the staff, that we now have publicly posted a summary of our student and families contracts, which is, I think, a significant step forward in terms of transparency. Instead of just having a brief sentence, we have a summary of the scope of work, who's doing the work. And I think that provides important information to our community, but also at the same time protects and maintains the privacy of key financial data and terms that are in the actual contracts, which used to be posted. So I want to thank staff for coming up with a template which provides transparency and information, but at the same time protecting the district's information. I also had raised in the last couple of weeks, the last month, that some of the contracts, that the final performance measures weren't in the contracts and they were due by the 30th. So just in conversations with the district staff, I'm looking forward to getting those tonight. We also have contracts which have those performance measures due at the first progress report, which is December 1st. So I just want to make sure that at a certain point in time that those final performance measures get married up with the actual contracts and that in the summary. And then finally, I appreciate that Ms. Ledesma provided us an overarching summary of the reports that the contracts we've had for the last several meetings, and understand that the quarterly and annual reports that traveled with the contracts last year are in the process of being produced. So just want to thank staff for the follow-up from the last several meetings.
Right. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All right, the board will now vote on resolutions 6181 to 6185 and resolution 6187. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Shu voting.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Nathaniel. All right. Now we move on to resolution 6186. Do I have a motion and second to adopt resolution 6186, resolution to approve a cost of living adjustment for non-represented employees for fiscal year 2021?
So moved.
Scott, Director Bailey, did you second that? And I invite you, if you're not currently speaking, to please mute your audio. So it sounded to me like Director Scott moved and Director Bailey seconded. Correct. Okay. The Scotts. We got it. Is there any board discussion on resolution 6186? Right. The board will now vote on resolution 6186, resolution to approve a cost of living adjustment for non-represented employees for fiscal year 2020 through 2021. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6186 is approved by a vote of 6-1 with Student Representative Shu voting.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. And Nathaniel, we're going to go ahead and shift the agenda so that you can get to Jefferson for back to school night. So I invite you now to share your report with us this evening.
Thank you. I would like to begin by following up on student government elections across the district, and more specifically DSC member elections at those schools which do not currently have representation on the council. As you may know, the high schools which have student governments, many of the high schools which have student governments postponed their elections scheduled in the spring of 2020 as a response to the shift to distance learning. A number of those schools are hosting these elections now. For example, Jefferson is in the process of recruiting candidates to run, and similarly, Wilson is voting this week, including for their representative on the DSC. Also, in accordance with what I said last meeting, Yen and I have begun to reach out to the student government advisors or school admin of the schools which do not currently have representation on the council. Thus far, we have met with those from Wilson and Alliance at Benson, and will meet with MLC tomorrow, with hopefully more to come. Hopefully more schools come. I would also like to note that Q1 progress reports are due this Thursday, meaning that for those of us in high school, we are halfway through our quarter-long classes and a bit under a month away from grades going on our transcripts. I, for one, hope that progress reports give us more concrete insight onto how the student body is overall doing in their classes, especially compared to last spring, given how many aspects have changed since then. Additionally, members of the DSC would like me to mention that as the method of taking attendance in classes is at the discretion of individual teachers at many schools, there have been certain classes in which there have been unnecessary and inequitable attendance policies, such as requiring all students to have their cameras on for live classes. And finally, as you heard earlier, Jefferson's open house is currently underway, and I will be leading this meeting for a short time in order to join that one, which is, of course, the final open house of my high school career. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Nathaniel, this is Director Constam. I have a quick question.
Yes.
So about the elections for the DSC, do you have a way for those to happen in every high school now? Were you able to link them up with their student government elections, or are you still trying to work that out?
There is no standardized model, but to answer that, no, we have not completed working that out. We are in the process of trying to get representation from every high school.
Okay, let us know if there's anything we can do to help.
I also have a quick question, and that's that, is there anything you can do or the body can do to try to increase diversity in student leadership levels? I know it's not just on you, but I think I'd like to see, an effort being made to, hear from a wider variety of voices.
Director DePass, I'm happy to answer that, or Director Shu, happy to step back and have you answer it.
Jonathan, if you want to.
The only thing I was going to say, Director DePass, Jonathan Garcia, Chief Engagement Officer. Last year, we, working in conjunction with Danny Ledesma, our Racial Equity Advisor, we developed a set of goals and objectives around the desire to increase leadership opportunities for our students, particularly our students of color. So we began to identify key strategies along those lines on how do we increase diversity. So as Nathaniel and Ian are working to really unpack the DSC, really making sure that we have students of color represented, students experiencing disabilities, as students with different lived experiences that can help shape that conversation. And as always, as we are embarking on a number of endeavors, whether it's strategic planning or any decision making, we always try to ensure that we have a good representation, an intentional representation of students of color and of students across our region. So we haven't solved every single issue, but I think we're working towards improving the way in which our kids and particular our students of color show up in our decision-making ability. So I know that next month we're going to be, or later this month, my office is going to be sharing as part of our learning roadmap more on our community engagement. So I'm happy to when we get to that, have a more robust conversation about about increasing our student leadership opportunities for our kids of color.
That's great. Thank you.
All right, Nathaniel, enjoy your time at the back to school night. And I can't believe it's already your last one of your career. Time flies, doesn't it? All right, we have some proclamations tonight to celebrate. And so we're going to begin with recognition of October being Dyslexia Awareness Month. And we're going to be voting on a resolution to designate October 2020 as Dyslexia Awareness Month. And the full resolution is posted on the board website. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce the resolution and the proclamation?
Thank you, Chair Lowry. I'd like to invite Elizabeth Martin, who serves as our program administrator for dyslexia, to share with the board work that's been underway. And I can't think of a better representative for this proclamation. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero and board directors. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to share my screen because I want to show you. Oh, it looks like it's disabled. Let's see. Could someone share who has hosting capabilities? I have a brochure to share with you that really highlights that further awareness building that we can put forth to our families in PPS. Oh, looks like I am ready. So let me go ahead and share it as I talk through this. So over the past 9 months, even in the midst of our global pandemic, 4 members of the dyslexia advocacy group have collaborated together on a family brochure to get into our schools and get into our families' hands. As you can see here, and I'll scroll and show you, it's a little hard to see because it's going to be a folded brochure, of course, but this is really highlighting a few things like what is dyslexia in family-friendly language, how to recognize the potential signs and symptoms of dyslexia, what a student with dyslexia needs in their instructional day, and how to really access resources and support within our community in PPS as well as outside of our community in PPS. So it will be available to families as early as our conference time. And then it will live in our schools and it will be available to students, families, to really build that awareness across our system. I have to say it's been really fun. I learned some graphic design skills and I could not have done this without our advocacy group. So I have to give a special shout out to Carrie Luce, Jennifer Poltz, and Lisa Lyon, who collaborated on this to get a product that we feel really proud of. So thank you for letting me share this tonight. And I look forward to sharing more later this month during our board study session.
All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth. The board will now vote on resolution number 6188, resolution to designate October 2020 as Dyslexia Awareness Month. Do I have a motion?
Chair Lowry.
Yeah, sorry.
We do have a public comment for this resolution. Should we do that before the vote?
Yes, let's please have the public comment now. Thank you.
Okay, we have Moira Finnegan.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Chair Lowry, Vice Chair Bailey, Superintendent Guerrero, and members of the school board. My name is Moira Finnegan, and I'm a speech language pathologist at Franklin High School. Well, this has got to be one of the most challenging school years ever. I'm here this evening to celebrate and to share my joy about the progress PPS has made in serving the needs of students with reading difficulties, including dyslexia. I came to learn about dyslexia 9 years ago during my first year with PPS. I had a 5th grade student who transferred from the Pioneer program to Aquid Green, which was where I was working at the time. And at my first meeting with him, this student said to me, "Can I tell you a secret?" And it turns out his secret was, I can't read. He was a 5th grader, but he was reading and writing at a 1st grade level. He had behavior issues, which may well have been developed as a way to divert attention from the fact that he couldn't read. He was African American. His reading disability, coupled with the racial inequities that pervade our society, put this student at risk for dire life outcomes. I tried to teach the student basic reading skills, but I quickly realized I was in over my head. The student could read simple words like top, but when I added an S to create the word stop, the student was completely lost and could not read the word. I didn't know how to teach him to read because I didn't understand why he was having such a hard time sounding out the words. I sought out specialized training on dyslexia and learned that this student was suffering from severe dyslexia. Due to a lack of training on dyslexia in their teacher preparation programs, not a single educator in general education or special education who had worked with this student over the years had picked up on the clear signs of dyslexia. Something needed to change. That was 2012. In 2013, some PPS parents and I, along with another PPS educator, started an advocacy group called Decoding Dyslexia Oregon. In 2015, our group worked with the Oregon legislature to pass laws requiring that all kindergarten and first grade students in our state be screened for signs of dyslexia, and at least one teacher in every elementary school be offered appropriate training so they could spot the signs of dyslexia that had been missed in my student. This year, under the leadership of Tanya McKee in the PPS Humanities Department and with the support of Superintendent Guerrero, our district began offering a course on the science of reading called Letters. This course is an excellent way for PPS educators to get the information they need to spot the signs of dyslexia and provide effective instruction for their students who are struggling to learn how to read. I am grateful for Tanya McKee's passion for ensuring that all students, especially our Black and Indigenous students and students of color, get every opportunity to learn to read. She puts it so eloquently when she says reading is a civil right. It is the skill that empowers our students, who are future adult citizens, to participate fully in our society. It was a dream of mine back in 2013 to see a training like this offered by the district. I can confidently say this training has the power to change the life trajectories for some of our most vulnerable students. I hope the district will continue to make funding for this program a priority. Thank you for making this investment in our educators and our students.
Thank you so much. And can I just say you have the coolest wallpaper I've ever seen. All right, so do I have a motion to proclaim or to adopt this resolution about Dyslexia Awareness Month?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Director DePass seconds, and I think that was Director Scott, or Director DePass moves, and I think it was Director Scott who seconded, correct? Okay, great. Any board discussion on this resolution?
Something I want to say. I want to just thank all the parents and staff who worked on this, because having had a child who struggled to read for the first 5 years in PPS, this is a super important unlock for our students. So thanks for the parents and staff for persisting and making it happen, because this wasn't in place in the early 2000s, and it certainly wasn't in place in the early 1960s when I needed it. So, thank you to everybody. And I'm glad that we can have a month in which we recognize and celebrate the progress that's been made and the work that we do for students who need extra help.
Chair Lowry, if I may. Thank you for that recognition, Director Brim Edwards. This has been quite a collaborative effort. I think we all recall the attention that was brought on this really important topic, and it just so happens our next study session for directors will be focused on dyslexia, and you'll get to hear all about the amazing progress that has been done in this area. So we're gonna pause here on this wonderful proclamation, and we'll get to learn a lot more later this month.
And I do think it's very telling of the work that PPS has done, that Orton Gillingham practitioners and educators has recognized the district for the work that we have done. And I know that Orton Gillingham is in a lot of ways leading some of the educational innovations on dyslexia education. So that's a great honor and a real recognition from experts about the work of the district. All right, let us now vote. All those in favor of adopting I've lost my script. All those in favor of adopting resolution 6188, please indicate so by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? All right, resolution 6188 is approved by a vote of 7-0. And I think Student Representative Shu has left us, correct? Yes, okay, so 7-0. All right, if you like proclamations, you're gonna be super excited because we have like 4 more, because October is a big month and we have a lot of amazing things going on in our district. So we are gonna recognize that October is also Disability Awareness Month. And we're gonna be voting on a resolution to proclaim October 2020 as Disability Awareness Month. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this proclamation?
Yes, I think you're all very familiar with Noelle Sisk, who continues to be an important part of connective tissue with our families and community. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you a partner in this work now to support Spanish-speaking families, and that's Paulina Larena. So you're going to hear from both of them. Directors, if you recall, many of you have accompanied me on a number of important dialogues with Spanish-speaking families who really appreciated that important link between school system and our special education families. So I can't think of a better pair tonight to speak a little bit more to the work in this area. Noelle and Paulina.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Guerrero. I'm excited because this is the first full year that we've had this resolution. And as a parent of a child with a disability and someone who works as a professional advocate for people with disabilities, I believe this resolution is something that says we as a district care and believe that our students with disabilities are equal members of their school communities. It calls on us as parents, advocates, and school professionals to continue in action and not in just words and not just awareness. The IDEA is now 45 years old, which is what gives our students the right to access an equal education as a student with a disability. And beautifully, with this bond in collaboration with this, the ADA is now 30 years old. And while neither one of those two things are too old, because that's around my age, I am very excited that we are recognizing this as one of the largest districts in the Northwest. And we serve so many students with disabilities, both invisible and visible. And I think that it's very important, including our students with mental health needs, our students with neurodiverse needs, and our students with mobility needs, that they're not just getting into the buildings, but when they are in the building, they are welcomed, and that they have an investment that we are doing in curriculum to make sure that it's accessible to all students. And I think part of this resolution will also call on the general education population of teachers to be equal members in this process, and that it's not just landing on the special education educators who are brilliant and the parent advocates who believe this with all their heart, but that we need this to be a collaboration between all of us to make sure that all of our communities are welcoming. So I very much thank you for considering this evening. And I'd like to hand it over to my amazing colleague. This is her second day and her first main meeting in front of the board. So, but I can't see her on the screen, but I believe Paulina.
She's there.
Buenas tardes. Good evening. Yeah, my name is
Sorry,
Paulina Larenas. This is my second day, so I'm a little bit nervous and I'm not sure exactly what I can say about the job, but I'm super excited about working with Noelle and doing this job. For me as a professional, I've been doing this job for about 7 years. And as a parent, I have 2 kids who receive special education services and have a disability. So I'm excited to support families. I think the special education system is really complex, and I'm happy to be here helping families. I was once a parent who didn't speak English, so I know how difficult it can be navigate the system without the language. So I'm excited. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paulina.
Gracias.
Lowry.
Yes.
Just a quick note for the public and to boost their confidence. This second position is made possible through a wise investment of the student investment account here at PPS.
And Paulina, you are in good company. We had Dr. Brown and Dr. O both spoke on their first day with us, or one of their early days with us. So I think the same was true of our climate curriculum person as well. So we have a tendency of doing that, and then we see amazing work from people. So welcome, and thank you for being here and for the work you do. As we consider this proclamation, the other good thing to note is the work the bond will do for accessibility, and thinking about how all of our students can feel welcomed. I loved what you said, Noelle, about, across the spectrum of lots of different students with lots of different needs, how their schools can be places of welcome, places of support, and places where students get what they need. Before we have any further discussion on this resolution, let's get it before us officially. So do I have a motion on resolution 6189?
So moved.
Second? Does anyone have a second for me?
Second.
All right, I heard Director Brim-Edwards and then Director Bailey. So Director Brim-Edwards moves and Director Bailey seconds the motion to adopt resolution 6189. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any citizen comment on resolution 6189?
No.
All right, I saw that Michelle had unmuted. Is there any board discussion on this resolution? Director DePass?
I wanted to just welcome Paulina to your job and wish you the best.
I would like to too, and I just wanted to share that last year I had the opportunity to meet with a group of Spanish-speaking parents who have children in special education, and their advocacy was amazing. And this is also, I know, an area that is near and dear to the superintendent's heart. So it's a combination of his commitment and their advocacy that resulted in making these improvements and funding your position. But I have to say, it was really heartbreaking for me to talk with those families, because to the extent that language was a barrier for them, their children were not receiving special education services, and they couldn't advocate for them, and they couldn't express what their individual needs were. And so they were just locked out of educational opportunity. And it was really, really painful. And so I'm especially glad and proud to see the toolbox that we have that's so user-friendly for families, really explaining step-by-step how to navigate this special education process and the IEP process. So you guys are an amazing team, and I'm so grateful that our families have this access now.
So go ahead, Scott.
No. Huh?
You were going to say something? Okay. You look so official there with your tie. So I wanted to maybe just do a brief addition to what Chair Lowry mentioned, that in addition to, I'm assuming, adopting this resolution tonight and supporting our students and families throughout the year in terms of providing operational support and the work that is done by the staff team. I also want to just make sure that we flag for the whole community that, as Director Lowry mentioned, that we have an opportunity with the bond to make a huge step forward in terms of making our facilities accessible to our students. We have $39 million in the bond that would allow that, provide that every main floor of our schools across the city would be accessible. And this is part of reaching our commitment, or making our commitment real when we talk about ADA and making our buildings accessible. So the bond, everybody has an opportunity this November, next month, or if you vote early this month, to help make our buildings a place that are welcoming. And that's the perfect complement for the staff that will welcome people once they're inside the buildings.
It helps if I actually hit the unmute button. All right. The board will now vote on resolution 6. Oh, I'm on the wrong resolution. 6189. This resolution reads, Portland Public Schools Board of Education proclaims October 2020 as Disability Awareness Month and galvanizes efforts that will lead our schools and policymakers to create real systems change so people with disabilities will enjoy equitable, inclusive educational experiences. Ms. Larenas, would you like to read the resolution in Spanish?
Yes, let me look it up. Sorry, I can find it out. So, la Junta Directiva de Educación de Portland Public Schools proclama octubre 2020 como el mes para crear conciencia sobre la discapacidad e impulsar los esfuerzos que llevarán a nuestras escuelas y a los responsables de las pólizas y leyes a crear cambios reales en los sistemas para que las personas con discapacidades disfruten de experiencias educativas equitativas e inclusivas. Gracias.
Gracias a ti. I always have a hard time finding things during board meetings because I've got my board books, agenda site, I've got my script, which helps me know what's coming next, and then I have the Zoom. And so I totally understand not being able to find things right at the moment when you need them. I think my computer definitely hides the screens right at the moment when I need to call upon something. So thank you for your patience with me, and I so appreciate Ms. Larenas, you reading that in Spanish. All right, the board will now vote on resolution 6189. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6189 is approved by a vote of 7-0. All right, we are ready for our next proclamation. October is also National Substance Abuse Awareness Month, and we will be voting on a resolution to recognize October as National Substance Abuse Awareness Month. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item?
I'm going to have staff, our district coordinator for drug and alcohol supports, Mary Crow, to say a few words about the REAL initiative, which I think you've heard a little bit about previously, which is really aimed at providing a full spectrum of care for students who are experiencing addiction and mental health issues. Mary?
And I would just like to say, Superintendent Guerrero, for members of the public, that REAL is REAHL. So if they're looking it up or want more information, it's REAL with an H after the A.
Thank you.
Because it's recovery, education, and action for healthy living. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Mary Crow, and I'm the coordinator of the REAL Continuum, and it's my honor to address the superintendent and the school board. 3 years ago, Chief Brenda Martinick had the vision that Portland Public Schools should offer a coordinated continuum of substance use services that start in kindergarten with skills-based health education and continue throughout our students' academic careers. An example of this is last year under the leadership of the Health and PE Program Administrator, Dr. Jenny Withicum, Portland Public Schools Middle Schools adopted the BOTVIN Life Skills Prevention Curriculum, which is the national best practice for delivering skills-based substance use prevention education. In my role with the Student Success and Health Department, I get to work to address the needs of our students who are struggling with substance use. This includes expanding the range of services offered under the REAL Continuum, recovery, education, and action for healthy living. And that includes intervention, access to treatment, and support for ongoing recovery. Again, under Brenda's leadership, we've prioritized responding to students with education and connection to services instead of discipline. This was accomplished in part with the revision of the Healthy, Substance-Free Learning Environments and Buildings Board policy that was passed about a year ago. To achieve the overall goals of RIL, we work with a range of community-based providers and district staff to provide culturally responsive and culturally specific services, including psychoeducation, assessment, and the delivery of treatment services in our schools. I work with my district colleagues, in particular the counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, to support students with substance use issues and then design systems that are there for our kids and their families. Our goal is to have a range of interventions that meet students where they are at, with school-based services that are seamlessly integrated into our students' overall educational experience. And a district-wide student advisory group has been formed to help guide this work. This work's made possible by the support of James Loveland and Amy Rona, and I couldn't do it without them. And I'll answer any questions that you have.
All right, great, Mary. We're going to go ahead and bring the motion before us, and then we can ask questions after that. So do I have a motion on Resolution 6190 to recognize October as National Substance Abuse Prevention Awareness Month? And the full contents of that resolution are posted on our website.
So moved.
Okay. Second? Who seconds?
Second.
All right, so Director DePass moves and Director Bailey seconds. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on Resolution 6190?
No.
And I believe that was Director Constam.
That seconded? Oh, I'm so sorry. So Director
moved.
Constam moved, and thank you. And Director Bailey seconded. All right, is there any board discussion on the resolution, or do we have any questions for Mary?
I just want to say I'm really glad to see this program in place. Many, many years ago, before I was gray, I started an outpatient treatment program for youth abusing alcohol, probably the first in the state. And it was really not recognized that alcoholism can start quite young. And of course, alcohol abuse, which there can be kind of it's hard to tell where one ends and one starts sometimes, is a huge issue for particularly teenage students dealing with life's issues. So I'm just really glad that we have that service system in place.
All right, the board will now vote on this resolution, which reads, Portland Public School Board of Education hereby declares October 2020 Portland Public Schools Substance Abuse Prevention Month and invites all community members to join us. We want to recognize the dedication, hard work, and efforts of staff to support all Portland Public Schools students kindergarten through 12th grade to live healthy lives with the skills they need to address challenges and be prepared to reach their highest goals and aspirations. All right, the board will now vote on Resolution 6190. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6190 is approved by a vote of 7-0. Nathaniel's not here, so I'm always ready to say that next part about Nathaniel. All right, if you were excited about those first three resolutions, guess what? We still have one more. It is National Principals Month, and we know that our principals have been working incredibly hard, especially during distance learning, to figure everything out for us. We're going to now be bringing before us a resolution to designate October 2020 as National Principals Month in Portland Public Schools. And my cat Max has joined us because he's a fan of principals as well. So Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item for us now?
I'd like to introduce our Chief of Schools, Dr. Sean Bird, who on our behalf is going to share our appreciation for our school leaders. Sean.
Thank you, Superintendent. October is National Principals Month, and I want to publicly acknowledge and appreciate the work of our school leaders. The principalship is a challenging job under normal circumstances when principals are called on to be leaders, teachers, counselors, nurses, moms and dads, and so many other things. And during this global pandemic, our principals have shown flexibility, creativity, and tremendous grace under pressure. I couldn't be more proud to be the chief of schools here in PPS, leading this incredible group of school leaders. There's a growing body of research that points to the significance of principal leadership on student achievement. The only person in the school who is more influential on student outcomes is, of course, the classroom teacher. And it is the principal who creates conditions in schools that allow our teachers to create their magic with students, which is why it's important for us to continue to support our principals and continue to develop their skills as instructional leaders. I often tell people behind every great school is an outstanding principal who empowers their teachers and communities. So thank you, board members, for adopting this resolution this evening, celebrating our principals, and please join me throughout the month in thanking them for a job well done.
Thank you, Dr. Bird. The board will now vote on Resolution 6191, resolution to designate October 2020 as National Principals Month in Portland Public Schools. And this resolution is posted in full on our website. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I think that was Director Scott moved and Director Brim Edwards seconded. Great, okay. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on Resolution 6191?
No.
Is there any board discussion on this resolution?
I guess I just want to acknowledge all the principals and assistant principals, vice principals in our school district. In the 18 years that I had kids in Portland Public Schools, I've got to say, I learned so much from the principals at my children's school about leadership, about being student focused, about problem solving, about communication, about building teams. And I totally agree with Dr. Bird's statement that behind, I'm going to paraphrase, behind every great school, there's a great principal or an amazing leader. So I know we've got people working super hard across the district in highly unusual times. So I want to just add my thanks to all those building leaders.
I would echo those comments. I'm really glad we have this resolution to acknowledge this moment. I think in our, my visits to back to school nights, over the last few weeks, just either meeting or re-meeting some of these principals and just hearing them, talk about what they've done and gone through just to, in this time, in this moment, to get the schools up and running in a virtual environment. I mean, principals work really hard all the time. I mean, this is just an exceptionally difficult time, and I think the principals are really coming through, and I think they really are the heart of a school. And just even on a personal level, my kids have been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate to have principals like Deanne Froelich and Aaron Bird and Philippe Ristich and just some amazing talent within the district. And so I'm glad we get a chance to honor them.
Hear, hear. I just will chime in and say I think the defining characteristic of our principals is their phenomenal dedication to their jobs and to their school communities. It is a job that doesn't stop at the door. It doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. It doesn't stop at the list of responsibilities that someone might have told you were going to be responsible for. It's really all encompassing and takes a very wide and diverse skill set. So here's thanks to our principals. And also I want to applaud the district for being a lot more thoughtful and investing a lot of time in the last 2 years in developing a strong principal pipeline, because that has not been the case in the recent past in Portland Public Schools. And so I like to see us continue to nurture our teachers that are interested in an administrative role, and to bring more of our teachers of color into that and recruit from outside, and just invest the time and energy needed in developing great principals for the future.
All right, we are going to go ahead and vote on the resolution, which reads: the Board of Education designates October 2020 as National Principals Month and extends sincere appreciation to school principals for their individual and collective commitment to the success of all students in Portland Public Schools. All in favor of Resolution 6191, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6191 is approved by a vote of 7-0. All right, we turn now to our student and public comment. Before we begin, I would like to review our guidelines for comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and to provide your comments. Public input informs our work, and we've celebrated a great deal of that work tonight with our 4 proclamations. But we know that there is much more for us to reflect on as we hear your thoughts and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen. Board members and the superintendent will not generally respond to comments or questions during public comment, but our board office will follow up on issues raised during public testimony. We request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter rather than brought up during public comment. And if you have additional materials or items you would like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you email them to publiccomment@pps.net. And so that's all one word, publiccomment@pps.net. Please make sure that tonight when you begin your comment, you clearly state your name and spell your last name. And you'll each have 3 minutes to speak. You will hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it is time to conclude your comments. Now, Ms. Bradshaw, I think we have some exciting comments signed up for tonight. I know several of us have heard from Ruby already, but who all do we have signed up for student comment, Ms. Bradshaw?
We'll start with Ruby and her sister, Essa.
Ruby, I'm so glad you're here. I saw you on KATU and I've received your excellent emails, and so I look forward to hearing from you again tonight. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Ruby Waschall. My last name is spelled W-A-A-S space no hyphen S-H-U-L-L. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm currently a 5th grader at Bridger School. I am here to talk to you tonight about the possible renaming of Kellogg Middle School for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I would like to start by saying that this isn't about me or what I want for myself. This is about something bigger, something we need to see in our community, the recognition and celebration of trailblazing female leaders. Based on the over 3,500 supporters on my Change.org petition, I know many others also want this. I live a few blocks away from what is currently Kellogg Middle School. I can tell just by looking at it that a lot of kids will go there. They will really be influenced by the name of the school. I think Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg would be a great person to name the school for many reasons. For many years, I have been really inspired by who she was and have conducted research about her life and work. A few things have really stood out to me. I will first talk about her character. She was born into a lower middle class family and ended up on the Supreme Court. Next, she never gave up, even when she was told no countless times. Lastly, she still managed to fight for what she believed in, even after the death of her mother, sister, and husband. All these things represent her perseverance. Now I will talk about her influence. She has fought for equal rights for women as well as men. She has taught us about the importance of equality, and she has fought for the opportunity for children to pursue their dreams, not limited by their sex or gender assigned to them at birth. In this moment, we all need hope and inspiration. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a symbol of both. Thank you for your time, and now my sister will speak.
My name is Essa Waschall. My last name is spelled W-A-A-S space no hyphen S-H-U-L-L. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm in the 3rd grade at Bridger School. Ruth was first in her class and very focused on change. When Marty Ginsburg, her husband, was diagnosed with cancer, she attended his classes on top of her own. She has changed the world and deserves to have a school named after her. Mr. Joseph Kellogg did many things for the community in his time while he was alive, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg is here for our time in this century. When Ruth was a kid, Mom stayed home and did the cooking and caregiving while the dads went to work. Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't think this wasn't fair, so she knew this needed to change. She has made our world a better and fairer place. So will you please consider Ruby and my proposal? Sincerely, Essa.
Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For public comment, we have Kelly Purdy.
Hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity to address the board and superintendent. My name is Kelly Purdy, last name spelled P-U-R-D-Y. I use she, her pronouns. I wrote to you on September 16th about prioritizing mental health by simplifying schedules and requirements. My kids are in 3rd grade and kindergarten, so I focused on reaching out to the kindergarten through 5th grade community to come up with a concrete proposal on how to do this. And with the help of my PTA president, Harmony Quiros, we sent this proposal out as a petition 4 days ago. And as of 6 p.m. tonight, 265 people have signed it. Since I have limited time to speak, I will go ahead and present this proposal. It reads, Dear Portland Public Schools administrators, we, the undersigned parents, teachers, and staff of PPS, in the interest of making distance learning more sustainable and improving mental health outcomes for all students, families, and teachers, urgently request that you simplify the K-5 schedule by reducing district requirements. While we appreciate your desire to provide students with a robust education despite the pandemic, the reality is that now more than ever, a trauma-informed approach to education is required. As a result of COVID-19 and other mounting community crises, all students, parents, and school staff are experiencing trauma. Because neurobiologically, no one can learn unless they feel safe, we must prioritize predictability and consistency over typical achievement metrics. Unfortunately, the requirements put forth by the district, though well-intended, result in a chaotic, stressful meeting schedule that requires adult intervention at home to maintain. And when there are multiple young students with disparate schedules, the task is near impossible. Some teachers are quietly simplifying their schedules in response to community feedback, but this puts them in a precarious situation. This also creates further inequity between students with a simple, regular daily schedule and students whose teachers are still trying to follow the unsustainable schedule required to meet district guidelines. For these reasons, we are writing to urge PPS to update its requirements to allow for a simple daily K-5 schedule, as well as empower teachers and principals to make adjustments quickly in response to community feedback. I sent this out in an email to all the board members and the superintendent, but here is a quick visual of the schedule that we are proposing. It's an example simplified schedule, and the qualities of this schedule are it is a simple, consistent daily schedule for all students K-5, same times each day. Students from all grades transition at the same time for greater ease of managing multiple students at home or in a childcare setting. Students will attend the same small group each day, whether it's language arts or math. So relationship building, predictability, and consistency is prioritized over ideal differentiated learning. Differentiated learning can still be attended to in the asynchronous apps. Finally, the mini lessons are recorded, separate from the live meeting to avoid confidentiality concerns, and they can be accessed asynchronously for maximum flexibility for students and parents. So in summary, with simpler goals, we contribute positively to the mental health of students, parents, and teachers so that effective learning can take place during these unprecedented times. I welcome your questions and feedback. You can reply to the email I sent yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Taylor Morrow.
Okay, greetings. So thank you, board members. Most of you know me. Andrew, I do not know you. Michelle, I do not know you, but everyone else I know, and many of you have actually a working relationship with. I helped to contribute on the previous bond. I support this bond, but I'm here to talk about that projected enrollment that was right sizing with the bonds. And the thing that I'm really disappointed with PPS, which is the failure to do equitable boundary drawing. I really find it absurd that we're doing this by the Southeast. Fundamentally, my value is, and even the value of the law is, that we do not have a right to walkability or rideability. For me as a Black person, that signals that, right, oh, you can have the ability to choose your kid to walk to any school or ride to any school they want. I've never had that as a Black person in my life. I was bused, right? So I want you to understand that what you need to put as a value is taking schools that have too many students and dispersing them among other schools that don't have enough students. The value should not be placed on whether or not a kid can walk or ride, because that is not constitutionally guaranteed, and that is not guaranteed by any Oregon statute, right? It's something that parents use as an excuse or as a euphemism or as, you know, a dog whistle to not want to send their kids to school with Black and brown students. And although I appreciate white parents putting BLM signs in your window and on your lawn, send your kids to school with my kids in Madison. Don't be afraid to send your kids to where my kids went to school because they're Black or brown, right? Understand that you as the parent have the most value to making your kid a successful human in this environment. And so regardless of where they're going to go to school, they're going to be fine. But because of the fear, and I want you white parents to know this, you fear sending your kids to school with my kid because he's got wide nostrils and broad lips. But you'll put a sign in your yard, right, saying you support Black Lives Matter. And that hurts, right? Because we're exhausted. We're exhausted with the rhetoric. We're exhausted with the you know, you're trying to placate us, right? I appreciate everything you've done. I definitely, like, I drive every day past, like, Madison. Like, I love it. Like, my heart sings seeing what my kids in the future of my neighborhood has. I got a 14-year-old. So experienced 4 years of it. I had a kid that recently graduated. But I want the experience, regardless of what the physical experience to be, that every student and every parent values diversity. And that means don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to come in my house and eat. Don't be afraid to come to our restaurants. Don't be afraid to hold hands and send your kids to school with our kids, because that's the way I perceive living in Portland for 17 years as a transplant, living in Portland as a Black person. So please do something to make equitable boundaries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Randolph Carter.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Randolph Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R, preferred pronouns he, him, his. I want to, first of all, congratulate the board on passing the proclamation with regard to dyslexia. I have a 7th grader who attends Beverly Cleary School who was diagnosed with dyslexia 4 years ago when we moved to Portland. He has had, up to this point, an extraordinary experience with great support from his teachers. But we actually found that in order for our son to be academically and socially successful, we needed to reach out to resources beyond the district. We retained a tutor to assist with his reading and writing, and that has allowed him to keep pace with other students in his class. I might say that that tutor is not exorbitantly expensive, but it does require us to spend money to provide that resource. He also additionally had to have a math tutor, so that additional support for our son helped him keep pace, but it also caused us to spend money that, in retrospect, many families do not have. I guess tonight what I'm most interested in is pointing out that this kind of support is required. Our son has an IEP, and until the pandemic, he was receiving support. That support has been limited. The educational resources that he was getting from the district have been depleted at this moment when our most vulnerable students need our support. So, and we know that from the Oregon Department of Education, that students of color, and my son is African American, tend to be in the greatest need of support. So thank you for the work you've done, but we're in a moment right now when we need to keep those resources up to the requirements of our students. Let me just add also that Decoding Dyslexia and the resources they provided me and the district have been extraordinary. I'd like to recognize them and the support they have given. But I want to say that in this moment, I'd like the district to think about how we can work creatively to keep those resources available to our students in greatest need. I know it's difficult given the remote learning, given the social distancing, but these are the students who need both the technical pedagogical support as well as the social support. So thank you for the resolution, but I'd also like to make sure that those resources are made available to our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Colleen Kellogg.
Hello, hi, I'm Colleen Kellogg, last name Kellogg, and pronouns she, her, his. Thank you for giving me a few moments to speak, and thank you to the board. I know this is a difficult job, or you have a difficult job, and you volunteer your time for our community. Governor Brown released return to play guidelines for K-12 students over 2 weeks ago. The guidelines focus on safety and recognize the emotional, social, and physical impact the extended exclusion from athletics has had on our youth. The expectations and structures are clear and align with OSAA guidance. As of today, Portland Public Schools has not responded to the proposal from high school athletic directors who worked with coaches outlining their plans for safely complying with the rules and engaging student athletes. The community, students, coaches, and parents are anxiously awaiting for the green light in order to safely return or for safe training opportunities to begin, recognizing that our window for good weather is closing. As district leadership contemplates when to open Portland Public Schools fields and outdoor facilities, I would encourage you to consider these points: equity, safety, and commitment. The pandemic has revealed ugly truths. Opportunities are not equal for our BIPOC students, students who are impacted by food scarcity, students impacted by houselessness or poverty. Access to athletics and other activities also falls under this umbrella. Families across the state have enrolled their children in private clubs, sent them to other states for academy training, or hired personal trainers. All of these require financial resources. At public high schools, sports are available to all, regardless of income. Equity is also an issue as we talk about the past 3 weeks and access to school-based athletics in our region. Neighboring districts have moved forward with providing outdoor training sessions following the governor's guidelines. Tonight, Salem-Keizer announced that their schools will be returning to practice within the week. Why is Portland Public Schools denying their community an opportunity to engage in sports safely, knowing the mental health as well as academic impact sports and activities have on adolescents? Social emotional learning has been a high priority for districts across the state during CDL. Involvement in extracurriculars is a large component of the implementation of SEL at the high school level. Perhaps one concern is safety. Oregon has done a good job managing the pandemic in terms of infection rate. We remain one of the lowest infected states in the nation. This is largely due to many in our state following mask requirements and social distancing. As surrounding schools and districts start training, and in some cases competing, Portland Public School students will know about it. If they have not already, many kids will start gathering, playing, and training while not following protocols. They will not have the benefit of their coach's guidance, reminders, and expectations for safely participating in group sessions. Lastly, I want to mention commitment. As an educator, I have many students with a variety of needs. I cannot address the needs of every student every day, but that does not mean I do nothing because it would not be fair. I do what I can, when I can, to the best of my ability. If there's a tool that will benefit 45 of my students, I use it. Then I find ways to reach the other 15. Now is not the time to divide ourselves and create conflict over who gets to do what. If there are activities that can take place outdoors, the district has an obligation to allow that to happen rather than focusing on other programs that would be excluded. Instead, strategize how to empower indoor programs and clubs to design ways to meet and gather safely outdoors. Our students deserve the best decision-making process from us, not fear-driven or divisive thinking. I am hopeful that our student athletes, clubs, and other activities will be back with their teammates, coaches, and advisors by the end of the week. If Portland Public Schools chooses not to allow practices to resume, please make that announcement as well,
so that individual groups can move forward with discussing other options. There are seniors who have already lost their spring season and are losing hope for what ought to be their capstone year. And I would just add anecdotally that my daughter, when she was playing high school, her coach identified a mental health issue that I would not have seen. So I have a personal passion for coaches and sports. Excuse me, sorry. High school is also different from middle school and elementary. There's recreational opportunities for middle school and elementary students, for example, Little League, that have already put into place because Parks and Rec have opened up their fields. High school students do not have that option. High school sports is their one place, or clubs, where they can perhaps have some semblance of normalcy. I think that's all I have to say, so thank you.
I think sometimes the tears or the emotion really can speak volumes beyond the words that you shared. So thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that little piece of your daughter's story tonight. And I'm so thankful that there was that coach there to offer that support to your family. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any further public comment?
Nope, that concludes who we have signed up.
Thank you all again for your comments. And if you have any follow-up, please contact our board manager, Roseanne Powell. I think it takes great courage to share your thoughts and your stories. And so we really appreciate that, hearing what you have to share and the perspectives you all have on the district and the ways that we can continue to adjust to serve our students to the best of our abilities. So thank you for your time tonight and for being brave enough to speak up and to be vulnerable with us tonight. We hear now from our Superintendent Guerrero with an update about our district. Superintendent Guerrero.
Good evening again, directors and staff colleagues. Buenas tardes, and good evening to everyone who's tuned in this evening. I'm waiting for the visuals to come up, but I think that one of the main topics this evening we wanted to make sure and provide you a regular update about includes comprehensive distance learning and where we are with our planning there. So we have a number of important items to share with you as part of our staff updates. Dr. Russell Brown will be providing his regular update regarding our ongoing implementation. But it's the question on everybody's mind, and I'm going to get right to the punchline and share right up front here. And for everyone who's been carefully monitoring metrics here in Multnomah County, the health metrics just aren't trending in a way that would allow us to consider reopening schools at this time, even for hybrid or cohort learning anytime immediately. So because of this, we've decided we're going to continue with comprehensive distance learning through the second quarter, which ends on January 28th. We're going to be sending a communication to all of our families tomorrow to announce our decision. You'll recall that in July, we committed to let families know about our second quarter plans by October 10th. We need the public health metrics to dramatically improve. So I'll add my plea and asking all of us in the larger community to do our part by continuing to observe safe health practices, including and especially wearing masks. It's going to take all of us to get those metrics where we need them to be to allow us to welcome students back to classrooms, which we are anxious to do. Until then, we are focused on continuing to improve our comprehensive distance learning experience for all our students in all grades and concentrating our more short-term focus to increasing the number of limited in-person opportunities for special groups of students and other potential limited school-based activities. As has been the case throughout our pandemic decision-making, our highest priority remains the health and well-being of our students and staff, and we're going to continue monitoring objective health metrics provided by OHA and in consultation with our medical advisory team. You're going to hear more details on this topic from staff in just a bit. Tonight's agenda also includes a presentation on how to support welcoming and inclusive online learning. So given our new and different ways for delivering educational experiences, we're as committed as ever to our aspirations, particularly around issues of racial equity. Next slide, please, which remain particularly relevant as we think about the experience and the impact during this time of COVID. This includes disruptions to online learning involving bullying and hate speech, which have a disproportionate effect on our students of color, especially our Black and Native American students. You will hear from our teams about national trends of online hate speech and how we are working to build healthy online communities. You will also learn about the important role of social emotional learning during comprehensive distance learning and how our instructional teams are supporting culturally responsive pedagogy. So I look forward to the presentation coming up soon. Next slide, and I think mentioned earlier regarding work in the Southeast, I also want to provide an update on our enrollment and programming balancing work, more for the community, as I know members of our board have already been heavily involved in much of this work as it launches. So our initial work is focused on schools in Southeast Portland in advance of the reopening of Kellogg Middle School, which provides us with the opportunity to clarify feeder patterns in this part of the city. Our Southeast Guiding Coalition, made up of parents and principals representing Southeast schools, has held 3 virtual meetings to date. They concluded last week with the introduction of let me underline this, a first draft, also called a springboard, working title proposal. Key highlights of this initial proposal under discussion include Kellogg Middle School would reopen with the Spanish dual language immersion program that is currently at Mount Tabor Middle School moving there. Secondly, Harrison Park, which is currently a K-8 school, would become a middle school, a comprehensive middle school. And then third, other K-8 schools, including Arleta, Bridger, Creston, Lent, and Marysville, would be converted into K-5 schools. Feeder patterns, boundaries, and shifts to DLI programs were also proposed. Details can be seen in the first draft document on our website. It's important to note that this is a starting point of possible options for the Southeast Guiding Coalition to think about and discuss. And members of the coalition, thank you again, representatives from the various school communities will continue to work together in October to ask questions and develop additional versions of a possible plan. Later in October and again in December, we will host virtual town halls for the broader community. So there's much more to come. And finally, a reminder that enrollment and program balancing uses both a data-driven analysis process and community input to address such needs as equity and inclusion, transportation, facilities constraints, and much more. Meeting agendas, materials, minutes, and videos are all posted at the enrollment and program balancing on the PPS website. Next slide. You might recall us announcing last year that a number of Portland Public Schools applied and were selected to participate in the Verizon Innovative Learning Program. The chosen schools join others across the country in receiving dedicated tablets for all students and teachers. And besides the hardware, benefits of the program include free monthly data plans, technical project management, professional development for educators, encouragement of expanded STEM opportunities for students. Next week, students and teachers at Cesar Chavez, Fabian, Harrison Park, Lent, and Marysville schools will receive their tablets, free internet access, and a number of other resources. And we're grateful to Verizon for this support. Now more than ever, students need full and uninterrupted access to updated devices and reliable internet. I hope that this partnership with Verizon will inspire other potential technology companies serving Oregon to consider how they might do more to support our students, especially right now during comprehensive distance learning. And in our next slide, I shared a couple of meetings ago that no matter how unique and atypical our circumstances are, no matter how busy we might be adjusting to this new reality, there are certain things that continue along as before. Just a moment ago, I talked about our commitment to racial equity and social justice, which remains a lens by which we continue to critically examine our ongoing work. Our boundary review work continues so that when we finally can welcome students back into classrooms, we will have clarity to which campuses students can expect to attend next school year. And we also continue to recognize our communities and celebrate our dedicated employees. In the last couple of weeks, we've joined others around the country calling attention to Hispanic Heritage Month, Filipino American History Month, as well as World Teachers Day and National Principals Month. Thank you to all of our educators and leaders out there. And also, it was Custodian Appreciation Day. So thank you, Felipe Ruiz, who's pictured here, who works at Irvington Elementary, for your dedication. We appreciate you and your hardworking colleagues across all of our schools for your efforts. We have some talented people in Portland Public Schools. At our last study session, you had a chance to engage in some learning with Nicole Berg. I wanted to share with our directors that earlier today I was in a communication with our former U.S. Education Secretary, Dr. John King, who now works at the Ed Trust, and he's leading a very important K-12 climate change commission. And so we had a wonderful conversation, and he shared how much he's been following the work in Portland Public Schools and really admiring the leadership role that we've been taking in a district as he engages in this topic with other school systems around the country. And this evening, we brought proclamations in support of National Substance Abuse Prevention Month, Disability Awareness Month, and Dyslexia Awareness Month. Next week, another important day of honor, Indigenous Peoples Day. And so despite this nationwide disruption to school, our students and educators continue to be recognized. I wish I could tell you this evening about another bit of news happening later this week, but I'm sworn to secrecy with some embargoed information. But you will be hearing about one of our schools and an exciting award that they are being recognized with, so please stay tuned. And with that cliffhanger, that concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. We'll be sure to stay tuned for that. We've been here almost 90 minutes now, and so we are going to take a short 3-minute break. So we'll be back at 7:25. And while we're on break, we'll be listening to the Grant High School Choir. you had a chance to get up and take a quick stretch. It's important for all of us to move a little bit during these meetings to help us with our cognitive abilities and to stay on track. Superintendent, I believe that our next portion is going to be a really great update on racial equity and social justice and online learning. Would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair Lowry. And I confess I did walk in a couple circles around my office, so I did get up. Well, the safety and wellness of our students, particularly our students of color, is always of concern to us as parents, as educators. And even now in a virtual environment, that's especially important for us to be attentive to. So this evening, our Senior Advisor on Racial Equity and Social Justice, Danny Ledesma, is going to share with you some of the work underway in these important areas. Danny?
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, no, good evening. It's the superintendent mentioned, my name is Danny. And so as the superintendent framed for us, we are in the midst of really extraordinary circumstances this fall. And while we as a district, as a system, are coming together and being adaptive to new circumstances and new ways of delivering educational opportunities as online, you know, as a system, as a community, we are all still committed to aspirations and to hope, particularly around racial equity and social justice. And what we know at PPS is that we recognize that our trajectory is not necessarily about returning to a way that was, but rather how we can utilize this time as an opportunity to build something different and that is closer to our values and our aspirations. So I'm going to sort of take us through a little bit of just sort of a reminder and some repetition around some of the stuff that we know about around racial equity. And then my colleagues are going to talk about some specific ways that they are leading around this work throughout our district. So in the next slide, we have our vision. As you all know, our community came together over 2 years ago to chart our path, to develop our North Star as a district. And one of the things that I think is a mark to the good for our community is that in every aspect of the vision, there's a strong commitment to racial equity and social justice, from our core values to the portrait of graduates, to educator essentials, to the required ways that our system needs to shift so that we're much more focused on racial equity and social justice. And so in the next slide, we see that as a district, we are really sort of aligned around this work in several key ways. So as we talked about that, we always, as a district, are trying to make sure that we're aligned with our core values. You all know that in 2011, we were one of the first districts to pass such an overarching and really ambitious educational equity policy and plan that really sort of outlines from a policy level all the way throughout our system ways that we want to make sure that we're continuing to embed racial equity throughout our work. As you all know, that we use a racial equity and social justice lens, not only to get to better decision making, but as a tool to also help us come up with a shared analysis to help build a culture where we're all thinking critically, where we're committed to continuous learning so that we can improve the experiences for our students of color. And then we have a framework and plan that sort of helps us outline goals to put all of this into practice. So in the next slide, one of the ways that we think about our work and we sort of think about how we develop as an organization, as an organization with many moving parts, is we think about that individual. What does it take for an individual to grow and learn, to build skill and capacity around racial equity and social justice? But we also know that an individual can only go so far, that it really is about an underlying culture, a culture that supports learning, a culture that is audacious and committed, and a culture that reflects the beliefs and the norms and the values that are inclusive, that seek to shift power in ways that will promote racial equity and social justice so that we can deliver a stronger system. And so as we think about some of the work that's being done, you can start to see how we're trying to not only think about that sort of first and second sort of domain there, but to also think about how we're delivering a stronger system. So then you all know and have seen this next slide, which is our theory of action. This was developed as part of the development of our emerging strategic plan that really says if we take all of the strategies around racial equity and social justice and really embed them and integrate them and braid them with our instructional core, that we have a great opportunity to increase the effectiveness of our system, not only for every student, but in particular for our Black and Native students. And so we've committed to really think about how we can center the experiences of Black and Native students so that we can build a system and develop that muscle so that we can build a system that is much stronger for everyone. So, doesn't take very few pages into the paper or the internet to understand that we are in the midst of quite a bit of a racial reckoning. The wounds and the trauma of our country's history around racial equity are right at the forefront. And as a school system that's delivering instruction online, there's lots of ways that this shows up. And so you'll get to hear from my colleagues who talk about ways that we're trying to contend with some of the ways that this is showing up and to really sort of build a strong system. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Leanne O'Banion, who's going to talk with you a little bit about some of our online strategies.
Thank you, Danny. My name is Dr. Leanne O'Banion. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the district's Title IX director within the Office of Student Success and Health. As we know, our school communities provide the foundation for children's learning, growth, and development, as well as children and staff within our communities have the right to environments that promote mental, emotional, physical health, and safety and well-being. Harassment, discrimination, intimidation, exclusion, and acts of hate or bias are incongruent with the organizational values that Danny just laid out for you. And therefore, we cannot tolerate those sorts of behaviors. With this in mind, we appreciate the Oregon Department of Education's recent guidance, All Students Belong, enacted on September 18th, that specifically calls out hate speech and 3 broadly recognized symbols of hate. And those include the Confederate flag, swastika, and noose. These symbols are prohibited in school and thus also prohibited in our comprehensive distance learning environments. Given the systemic nature and root causes of hate, bias, and intolerance, to be effective, any solution must be trauma-informed and centered in the needs and healing of our most impacted communities. So rather than an immediate leap to discipline, which does not address those root causes, a more comprehensive approach will provide us with opportunities to examine the factors that create intolerance in the first place, while avoiding blame and providing opportunities for growth, learning, and understanding. This will also encourage dialogue and, most importantly, practice empathy building, which you will hear more about when Dr. Jill Bryant discusses social emotional learning as one way to begin the process of building community and a sense of belonging. Lastly, in order to begin this important work of prevention and harm reduction, we must first understand the kinds of behaviors that are occurring within PPS, online, within our school communities, and within our classrooms. To discuss this further, I will hand it off to my colleague, Elisa Shore, for more on the ways we're beginning to gather data to inform this approach. Thank you.
Next slide. Thank you, Leanne and Danny. I'm Elisa Shore. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Area Senior Director of High Schools. To fully live up to our district mission and vision, we must first start with a classroom community that makes students feel warm, welcome, and ready to learn. In a typical school year, the start of school focuses on setting up that classroom community and the environment for learning. With our current online environment, we realized that classroom setup would look very different, yet still came down to the same principles. First, we focused on setting up responsible digital communities, teaching staff and students how the internet works, how to protect data, acknowledging the digital divide, and learning the technical aspects of online safety, in addition to building empathy in the classroom community. Teachers established norms and protocols during Soft Start to help create these communities and spaces. From there, we are working in partnership with IT to ensure we have training for teachers, families, and students in how to use these online tools safely. We want to make sure teachers know how to monitor who enters online classrooms, respond when there's an incident, and train students how to use the tools. We are also communicating with families directly about the capabilities and limitations of these platforms. Unfortunately, incidents of online discrimination and harassment are escalating nationally, and we are anticipating an increase through the election. While we want to be proactive and create communities where this behavior does not occur, we know it will arise, and when it does, we focus on reporting events so we can track them to identify patterns while providing resources to students impacted by an event. To do so, we are relying heavily on those classroom communities to repair, restore, and educate. Our online tracking system currently shows most inappropriate online incidents are uninvited Zoom or Meet guests who are other students, but they're not the students enrolled in the class. Most of these incidents, while disruptive, are not targeted towards specific groups of students. And while we have seen a wide range of behaviors, the most common behavior we've seen is related to sexual harassment or inappropriate sexual content. While we respond to these incidents quickly and in a student-centered way, we remain convinced that the best way to address these challenges is to partner with our students, families, and communities to build empathy. This begins with building a strong foundation in social emotional learning to create a community and develop a strong foundation for learners. With that, I will hand it over to Dr. Jill Bryant, Assistant Director at MTSS, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, to talk more about our social emotional learning.
Thanks, Elisa. Yes, I'm Jill Bryant. I use pronoun she, her, and I'm, as Elisa said, the Assistant Director of Social and Emotional Learning, which is now housed in MTSS and is in Chief Martinek's Office of Student Supports. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share with you tonight what our SEL, Social Emotional Learning team, has been doing to support our teachers in schools since last spring. First, I want to share that I'm especially excited to tell you that this fall we have begun a partnership with the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, who are the leading experts in district-wide SEL implementation. Together with CASEL, we're now developing a 5-year plan for district-wide SEL implementation. This plan will build a framework and actions for SEL to be an integrated part of the work of PPS. We know that we must keep our focus on the long-term plan for district-wide implementation in order to make systemic change. And since March, we also have known that because of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, schools and educators need support now. This is why last spring, in collaboration with 2 other Oregon school districts, we created something I'm really proud of my team that we've done is a SEL PD that we're calling micro lessons. And you might check them out, that's linked in the slide here. It's a really quick format of professional development, and we have regional experts speaking. And this is available at any time on the web, and we've had many PPS teachers access it. We also created K-12 social emotional learning lessons for the soft start. And then additionally, we only have a team of 2 TOSAs, although now we do have support of MTSS, but right now we're a small and mighty team. And last week, teachers K through 8 have started teaching a 9-week unit called Resilience, We Can Do Hard Things. And that's a 9-week unit that should take teachers through early November. So in the development of these resources for schools and teachers, our SEL focus has been on and will continue to be supporting, as people have mentioned earlier, but supporting relationships and community building among our schools and central office. Relationship building and strong communities create a foundation for racial equity and social justice. As educators and administrators prioritize relationships and strong communities, schools and classrooms can become places where students, adults, and families feel a sense of belonging. And to finish here, as one social justice educator puts it, True social emotional learning is about understanding our relationships with ourselves and with others. It's to know ourselves as holistic human beings and to be able to see the humanities in others, to fight together for the world we deserve, which is rooted in equity and justice. I look forward to answering any questions at the end of the presentation. And I believe, Danny, you're next. Is that correct?
David Martinez?
Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry, David. We got out of order. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. David Martinez, I'm a program associate for Humanities Department, specifically supporting our K-5 language arts and social sciences. Just giving an update on a little bit of what the work the Office of Teaching and Learning has been doing since the spring, but also into the summer and fall, and what we help to provide to also support Jill and the work that she's doing with the SEL department. So excited to report that throughout the Office of Teaching and Learning, the teaching tolerance social justice standards are embedded in part of the unit planning process across all content areas, K-12. So in language arts and social sciences and the sciences and the mathematics, you're going to see the teaching tolerance social justice standards embedded throughout our units and throughout our lesson planning. And that's really important to know because these standards are divided into 4 domains: identity, diversity, justice, and action. And really recognizing that in today's diverse classrooms and in the state of current events today, students need the knowledge and the skills related to both prejudice reduction and collective action. And so with that, in our K-5, we're specifically going to be providing 30-minute block lesson plans for a suggested Friday delivery throughout the winter in support of what Jill's lesson plans that her team is also developing. And these lesson plans are going to be adopted from the teaching tolerance lesson plans currently available for educators and also aligned to the social justice standards. What we're really also hoping to start to develop is a progression of the teaching tolerance anchor standards and domains. And the real hope is that with these lesson plans, students are going to be encouraged to engage in a range of anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice discussions and actions. For our middle school, we're really excited in the second quarter, students will start to see the incorporation of teaching tolerance's new streaming class film Bibby in the language arts courses. The film and the supporting lesson plans, and the resources that we're going to provide educators really help support the critical conversations about identity, culture, family, and belonging among students, while also developing their knowledge and skills around issues related to race, racism, and police violence. So we're really excited to support all the work that Jill and MTSS teams have already developed. And I will take it away to Danny.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, we're hopefully you saw lots of different departments being represented and sort of saw all of the sort of like work that folks are doing around this sort of integration of sort of like our commitment to racial equity and social justice along with our instructional core. Special thanks to David Martinez, who's talking to us from several time zones away. So thanks so much for being willing to present with us. I think we're open up to any questions if the board has any.
I have a question of David, or of the Office of Teaching and Learning. So I think we had some teachers who collaborated on some Black Lives Matter curriculum. And I was wondering, it was my understanding that we were going to implement that in some way, shape, or form. So I was just curious about where that is and how it intersects with what you just described.
So I might just pop in because so really that work came out of the Office of Student Performance of School Performance, and so there was some initial work that folks had done with one of our school leaders, and the group sort of asked us to kind of make a commitment to some deeper level of integration into lessons to be able to make sure that the lesson planning was supported. And so our approach was to really do this integration between building off of the progression of the SEL lessons and integrating the racial justice standards in that way.
So what does that mean in terms of the work that had been done collaboratively by some of our school leaders. It doesn't fit with the framework that we've adopted, or?
No, I think what we think about this is like building the foundation to be able to sort of like continue to think about how to integrate those lessons eventually.
So we don't have any plans to integrate them now in virtual learning, or that's not in the works?
I think, I don't think that we see it as an either or, and we're really trying not to do that either or thinking around this. I think what we're really trying to sort of focus on is that we identified that there were some learning progressions that needed to happen. And we wanted to make sure that lessons were anchored in some of the common standards that we had as a district. And so this is, I think, what we consider some really good pre-work.
David, maybe this is, oh, I'm sorry, just one last follow-up. Maybe this is back to you, but were teachers involved in the thinking around the curriculum that you just described, our own teachers?
Absolutely. The teachers are the co-writers of this. They're actually the foundation of it. We're working with classroom teachers who specifically have actually asked to be a part of this because they're seeing it in their classrooms. So yes, absolutely. They're part of the development. They are actually the ones really at the core of it. So absolutely.
I have a question about support that's offered to school administrators. In other words, like is there a statement that they come out if there's hate speech identified in any of the online platforms? What's the district's reaction, when these incidents come up that we're anticipating or already are actually happening?
So I think we can talk a little bit about that. So the district has some, so we've developed some protocols where we sort of like in person, where we sort of like follow those protocols to be able to sort of like respond appropriately and then communicate out to families and students, and have been coordinating with sort of James Loveland's team around crisis response. I think this next level of online planning is making sure that we're giving educators and principals the right tools to be able to respond appropriately. So for example, there was a recent incident where something happened. The teacher was able to quickly remove that person from the online platform and then immediately turn into some group discussion to be able to address it adequately. And then the principal followed up with communication to families that were impacted. So I think maybe, I don't know if Leanne or Elisa would add anything else around some of the online work that we're doing.
I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Elisa. Part of the reason that we're tracking sort of what's happening is to try to better understand, are these things occurring because of technical problems with our platforms, or are they student behavior related? And so our response is going to vary based on sort of where that falls. Elisa, do you want to speak specifically to the response?
Yeah, I think, we try to model both that how we address the impact to that classroom community, how do we restore that community, and how do we educate? And so it varies depending on the incident and sort of the level and the age of the students. But just as Danny mentioned, really kind of stopping it in the moment, using the technical tools to do that, and then circling back either right then and there with further restorative conversations, and then also sort of dealing with the actor or however the incident was caused. So there's no one answer because it really depends on the situation. But we have kind of a list, and we have people who help a school leader problem solve what should come next.
It absolutely makes sense to be flexible in how we respond. And I'm curious with these technical, like with somebody Zoom bombing, for instance, do we know if that's coming from Portland or if it's from outside of the area? If it's coming from Portland, is there anything we're doing? You know, kids, our students are learning racism at home. Is there anything we're doing with parents? Are we communicating out to parents that, you know, if there is an incident happening in the school community, you know, that the adults, you know, what are we doing with the adults? Are we offering any updating communication if there's those hate symbols are found in our platforms or on our classes? I understand that we're responding based, you know, either through technology or other means, but I'm curious what we're doing with the adults that are in the system where these things are happening, and what we're doing with the adults, if anything.
Sure. You know, I guess one thing that I think that we want to make clear is that sort of, you know, these online incidents are really a sort of a barometer of where our communities are, right? Like this is not just happening in our schools, but throughout the country and throughout many different platforms. And so I think what our approach has been in terms of sort of like staying the course around our commitment around racial equity and social justice has been to continue some of the professional development that we've been doing to make sure that in all of our communications, as we speak to both families and to students, that we respond in a way that holds steadfast to our values, and that we make sure that it's pretty explicitly stated that there is no place for for hate speech, and we name it as hate speech, and that at the same time that you know, we want both our in-person and our online communities to be a place that are reflective of our values, that are welcoming, that where students feel a sense of belonging. And so I think the repetition of that, the explicit stating of that, and then sort of like anchoring it to the learning that we need to do as an organization has been our approach with adults. And then I think, you know, we have to just kind of keep on the repetition around that. This isn't something that happens overnight, right? If we get rid of one Zoom bomber, that it's all fixed, that these are deeply entrenched issues, and we have to continue to repeat our values and to build a system where you know, eventually that this is you know, it doesn't belong anymore.
Thank you.
Kind of a follow-up question to that.
Director Moore's been trying to get in for a little bit. So can we I know it's hard on Zoom, but could we get Director Moore in, and then we'll go to Director Bailey?
Well, if Scott wants to follow up, why don't you go, and then I'll follow you. How's that?
Thank you, Director Moore. So I think part of our PD is to enable our educators to feel more confident and skilled in, you know, when stuff happens in a classroom setting, how do we deal with it in a way that's productive for all the students and protective at the same time. How do we gauge that we're making progress along those lines? And maybe that's a Dr. Brown question, or Danny, go for it.
Well, so I guess, you know, we are sort of tracking these incidents. And so one of the ways that we do this is we sort of like have forms. And I think, you know, we have to build in the internal practice to kind of review these and make sure that we're looking at those. And I think that, you know, both Leanne and Elisa have talked a little bit about kind of how we're doing some of that as one way to gauge that. I think the other way that we're trying to gauge this is ultimately going back to what Dr. Bryant and what David talked about, is sort of like the importance of creating classroom community, the importance of sort of affirming students' identities, so that in addition to the sort of response, that we're also building into the progression of learning, that there is that we're creating conditions that are conducive for our students to learn and to feel a sense of belonging. And so I think there's and I know that as a board you all have done some deep work around sort of how are we going to sort of think about what those metrics look like in the form of, you know, our board goals and moving forward. So I think there's some rich work to do. I don't know if Dr. Brown would add anything, or if Jill or David.
Danny, I think you said it well. It really is about changing conditions for learning. And I think the place that we're most likely to see that show up over time is in more equitable outcomes in terms of student sense of belonging.
Right, Director Moore, sorry, Director.
Follow up. So I get that from the student point of view, but I'm asking specifically from the educator point of view, and not so much, although including the kind of big incident, but also on the one hand, the building that culture, and on the other hand, dealing with not the huge blowups necessarily, but the smaller day-to-day, how do we talk about this? Opinions clashing, and doing some critical thinking around that.
I mean, I think ultimately a lot of that work is sort of the work that we're engaged in now in our sort of like the next phase of our strategic planning, and sort of thinking about how do we make our educator essentials and our graduate portrait sort of like come to life. And so I know that Jonathan Garcia has been working with our consultants to really sort of bring in the adult voices that are impacted by that, to sort of think about how we're going to create some benchmarks, and then correspondingly how we measure that. But I don't think that we have. I think we're in that place right now and trying to.
And I appreciate that it's a work in progress.
Yeah, no, but I think it's. Thank you for bringing it to the forefront in terms of how we measure.
Director Moore, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So two things. Let me just follow up with where Scott was going. I get that ultimately we are confident that if we can change school cultures to be more inclusive, that we'll start seeing impact on outcomes. But in the interim, that's going to take a little while. In the interim, would it be fair to say that we might start seeing some impact of this new approach in terms of the, I guess it's called the Successful School Survey, the Panorama survey that we're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know that I think this year is an unusual year, right? And so sort of like how we baseline or set that baseline. You've heard me talk about this too much, but I think that's one consideration. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to do some learning, and I think we're in building the response. I would say that we're building the response right now, and sort of I think that there are a lot of connective tissue that's ready to sort of link to sort of different ways that we're measuring the totality of student learning and student achievement. And we're close. They're ready to be connected.
So let me get back to what my original question was going to be. But first, I'm thrilled to hear about all the work that's going on in the district around building the foundation, building infrastructure, building professional development opportunities, building capacity for social emotional learning. This is huge. I mean, I've been talking about this for years, but this is. If we can get this right, it will, a lot of other things will happen naturally. So I'm thrilled to see how far we've gotten in a relatively short time, actually. So thank you for all of that. My question is, can somebody say a little bit more about the work that we're doing with CASEL? I mean, a little bit more detail would be helpful.
Sure. Thanks, Rita. Appreciate that. Yeah, it is very exciting. So with Castle, they've been a great partnership so far. It's been about a month. Well, I'm not sure, who knows, but last spring, just at the beginning of school closure, Castle came and did a social emotional readiness engagement analysis with the district. And they came to us and they interviewed lots of different people and stakeholders.
We do a lot of that, honey.
And okay, sorry.
Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, to make sure you're muted. Thank you.
And they produced, then they had recommendations for where we should start our work. And so then this fall, we've begun that. And so beginning is working on this 5-year implementation plan. We hope that we're planning that soon, November-ish. I can't make promises, but right now begin to co-develop professional development. And we really hope to start with the central office administrators first, because we really want to create a culture that works its way down from the central office, so that we're modeling and we have an understanding of the foundational elements of SEL, and that shows up in the administrator's work, and then which goes down into the school principal, which then affects the school climate with the adults. So Castle and our work really has an emphasis on the adult, strengthening the adult SEL competency and capacity and ability to really understand our emotions, be reflective practitioners. So that's really what we're hoping to start this fall, is co-developing that professional development, rolling it out with a central office. I could tell you a lot more, but I know I only have a few minutes. So if you have any more specific questions.
Yes, I would love to sit down and have a cup of coffee sometime when that would be possible. Can I make a pitch in the meantime?
Yeah.
Can you include the school board in some of that training?
That actually, we were just talking with Castle about that we have our request, it hasn't gone out yet, but that we would love school board and really the executive leadership to start first. And Castle said that doesn't happen very often with the school districts that they work with. And they've been doing this work for over 20 years, but they highly recommend it, and we're impressed that that's where we as a district are pushing to start the work. So absolutely. And hopefully we'll have the support in doing that.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think this is a conversation that we'll continue to have for a long time. And I know that a lot of us on the school board are definitely wanting to continue to learn and grow. I see Director Scott waving at me. Did you have a comment you wanted to share, Andrew?
Are you trying to move us on, Chair Lowry?
Yes, I am.
I'll be quick then. Sorry to wait till the end. First of all, great. Thank you for the presentation, and it's great to sort of hear and learn more about it. A question I have: you talked somewhat about sort of some of the curriculum, right, and the teaching tolerance and what we're doing at different grade levels. I'm wondering what we're doing in terms of involving students in the actual process of disrupting racism within their schools. And I'm thinking more at the high school level, although it could probably be applied at a middle school or grade school level in an age appropriate way. But, to take a real life example, there was a racist incident at Wilson in an online class, and a racial slur was uttered at the end of a class. And I heard about it from my sophomore before it had sort of spread very widely. He heard about it from his friend. And of course, I'm a do-gooder. So my immediate response is, did your friend say something to the teacher? Did they report it to the teacher? No. And of course, my son looks at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you talking, Dad? I'm just telling you something I heard. Like, no, none of us are reporting it. And it got me thinking, and of course the teacher had heard, which is good. And I think there were some actions taken, but it got me thinking about both, do students know where to go, how to report, and expectations around that? And also, do they know how to disrupt it? And I know at my work, we've been doing bystander intervention training, which has been very helpful. And I have to imagine there must be some sort of bystander intervention that could be adapted, right? For, and again, I'm thinking particularly teenagers and high school students, that if we're going to change the culture of these schools and really eliminate the racism, I mean, yes, the adults are essential, but the students are absolutely essential as well in that disruption process. So
Yeah.
I'm curious what we're doing along those lines.
I might put David Martinez on the spot because at our last meeting, he spoke really eloquently about the power of the lessons to really sort of give voice to the students. And I think that what we're trying to show you is not the whole picture, but to show you like one portion of this. So I think you heard from Nicole Berg around climate justice. You'll hear more from Shanice Clark around some of the student engagement, from Jonathan. From their team around some of the work that's being done. And I think that, and certainly some of our contractors could talk a little bit about the way that we're doing that in partnership. But I think this portion is really about how through the learning students can really be empowered. And David, you don't have to say the exact same thing, but I thought the way that you framed it was really, it got me through my next couple of days. I thought it was really inspiring.
Thanks. Sure. I think I'll go back to the reason why we're using the teaching tolerance framework and the domains, and really emphasizing that it's that progression that I think Danny was talking about, and that we were alluding to earlier, that we want to get that base knowledge of identity going over, and the progression is diversity, justice, and action. And I think that justice and action really comes through when the students have the skills, the vocabulary, and the knowledge to combat and to speak about race and racism authentically from their experiences, and also from their peers as they're listening authentically. And it's the skill of listening, and it's the skill of learning what to do with that. Because I think, as board members mentioned, we're hearing things at home that maybe aren't actually the things that my teacher are telling me, or what I'm reading about. And the read aloud is something different than what I'm hearing at home. And so I'm gonna have the language to speak to that. And if I have the language, then I can collaborate with my peers. And this goes K through 12th grade. I mean, we have first graders who are talking about race and talking about their identity, and the power, if we can do that across the district, no matter what school, if you're face-to-face or even distance learning, right? I think it's possible. And I think with this, with the social emotional learning, that's really the foundation of anti-bias, anti-racist work. And so it really is, the hope is to empower students to take action. But they need to know, they need to have the vocabulary, the skills, knowledge, content. They need to know all of that so that they can engage authentically in that. And so absolutely, I think, as Danny said, we can talk about this all day, and we'd love to definitely follow up.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you so much. Like I said before, this is an ongoing conversation that we'll have, and I know that the board is wanting to learn and wanting to grow in these ways. And I really appreciate what you said, Director Scott, about empowering our students to be the leaders on these things, to support one another, and to also be able to come forward when they see something they know is wrong. And so I know that as an institution of learning, that part of our goal is not just to prevent these things from happening, but also to teach our students how to respond so that they can be that next generation of racial justice leaders. Superintendent Guerrero, I know that we have another update that's really exciting tonight. We're going to get to hear from Dr. Brown about all sorts of fun things. So would you like to introduce this next segment?
Yes, I think I alluded to it in my report. Dr. Russ Brown, who's continued to play coordinator, but really in collaboration with a lot of teams and a lot of staff. You're going to hear primarily from him, Danny, and Brenda provide an update. And it is going to start with, making sure there's a clear understanding of, what the health metrics are telling us, because that's really what's driving and providing the rationale for our decisions and the work that we're exploring regarding the potential of limited in person. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown here. Russ?
Thank you. And now I'm waiting for the presentation to be pulled up for us. Good evening, Chair Lowry, Vice Chair Bailey, Superintendent Guerrero, members of the board and the community. We're pleased to join you this evening. I'm pleased to be joined by Danny Ledesma and Brenda Martinak, who will be speaking to parts of this as well this evening. And as Superintendent Guerrero said, this is really the work of the entire organization. There are many, many individuals and teams that are working tirelessly to continue to move this work forward. Next slide, please. So today, in this evening's discussion, we're going to start with the health metrics and comprehensive distance learning and the constraints that we as a system need to operate within based on ODE's guidance and the Oregon Health Authority's guidance as well. We're going to go on and then talk about community needs and how we've been working to stand up services at our schools in support of the community, and Danny will speak to that. Then we'll have a break for some questions and answers, and then we'll pivot after that into talking about moving forward and limited in-person opportunities within that comprehensive distance learning framework, and how we're engaging a variety of folks in that as we move forward. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer series at the end as well. Next slide, please. Today's presentation really sort of follows our guiding principles, which have remained unchanged. Obviously, as we work through this, as we've made decisions, we center racial equity and social justice in all of those. And then as we move through that, of course, our first and foremost thing is to ensure the health and wellness of our staff and students. Then we talk about, again, cultivating connection and relationship with our students and our community. And then finally, we're going to talk about the opportunity, again, within limited in-person instruction to strengthen and innovate the instructional core within that framework. So we're going to start, next slide, please, with the health metrics. While some folks have spent a lot of time looking at this and having been engaged with the health metrics consistently, I want to make sure that we're all operating under the same information and same knowledge. And so we all have an understanding of why it is the superintendent announced that we will be remaining in comprehensive distance learning. And it really does start with the metrics and what those metrics where they need to be in order for us to be able to move forward. And it's a stepwise process. First on the line, the county must no longer be in baseline. Multnomah County hasn't been in baseline for quite a while. We've been in phase 1, so that criteria has been met. Because 10% of our staff lives in Clackamas County and another 10% of our staff or more lives in Washington County, we also have to consider what's going on in those counties when we're moving forward as well. We can't make an independent decision without also considering the health consequences and the health metrics in those counties as well. Next slide, please. So getting into the individual metrics that we look at and the state looks at as they consider whether or not we're eligible to move forward. For the preceding 7 days and for the past 3 weeks, we would need to have a case rate of 10 or less new cases per 100,000 people. And we'd have to have a testing positivity rate of 5% or less for both the county and the state. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look at case rates here, and this data is pulled from the Oregon Health Authority. And if we look at this, it goes back to early July and all the way to the most recent data that was available as of the date that this presentation was put together. And the blue line shows the cases per 100,000 folks in Multnomah County. And the red line shows the threshold for us to be able to go back into hybrid instruction. So the red line shows a threshold of 10 cases or less per 100,000. It should be pretty evident that we've been nowhere near that threshold during this window of time. As a matter of fact, we've gone from as high as almost 72 cases per 100,000 people to as low as 32 over that window of time. And unfortunately, we've been trending back upward. Next slide, please. There is a second threshold that is considered for kindergarten through 3rd grade. It's an exception that would allow us to bring early learners back. We did get close to that at one point when we were at 32 cases per 100,000, but we did not dip below that threshold, and we certainly did not maintain it over time. And again, we have ticked back upward in the past week. So next slide, please. If you put that all together, and this is sort of like a stoplight report, everything here has to be green. Everything has to be, we have to meet all of these criteria in order to be able to move forward. So as I mentioned earlier, our Multnomah County is in phase 1. And we would have to be looking at Clackamas and Washington counties who have numbers that are not too disparate from ours as well. Our case rates, as I mentioned, haven't dipped below either threshold for in-person or hybrid learning, nor of our neighbors for that matter. And our testing positivity rates have not been below 5% for the last 3 consecutive weeks. So at this point, we are not eligible. And again, frankly, looking at the case rates over time, we haven't been near eligible since we started keeping track of that. Next slide, please. So later in the discussion, we'll spend some time talking then about, well, within comprehensive distance learning, there is an option to begin to have some limited in-person activities at schools. And we want to talk about what those are, and again, the constraints for those. The one additional constraint above what we've spoken about so far, so we're in comprehensive distance learning, the one constraint within comprehensive distance learning is that we could not have had any confirmed cases amongst school staff or students for the past 14 days in the site in which we're considering standing up a limited in-person activity within the comprehensive distance learning option. At this point, next slide, please. We're going to move forward and have Danny speak to the inclusive planning and engagement practices that we've engaged in so far this fall. Danny?
Great. So, so as you heard from Russ, you know, as we face pretty grim and sobering realities around health metrics, as you all know, as board members who are active in our community and who are available and listening to parents and students, the need for support, the need for services is still very, very high. And so part of our approach has been, as we sort of start to contemplate limited in-person instruction, is to also plan for and to be responsive to the needs that have been stated by our communities, as well as some of the needs that are emerging. And so I want to just kind of recall us, if you remember, at the end of July, you had a presentation from Jonathan Garcia and Shanice Clark about some of the work that we were doing to engage families and students, particularly our students of color. So we had robust focus groups with Native families and students, Black families and students, people of color, as well as our DSC, where we were listening to and trying to pull out themes from sort of what were needs as we were sort of continuing to be in the pandemic. And those themes have continued to carry through. We heard about the need for access to technology as well as support in utilizing the technology. We've heard about the desire for students to spend more time with teachers, more time with caring adults, and to be able to form those connections. But also we heard about the need to be able to support our educators and making sure that teachers had the support to be able to spend the time online. We also heard just a lot of care and concern for social connection and supports for students, a lot of care and concern and anxiety about the impacts of isolation, of being socially distanced from friends and potential supports. And we also heard quite a bit of concern for being able to meet basic needs. We also continue to hear, and as you look at these sobering health metrics, a lot of anxiety and worry about the health and safety of students and families. And then we also heard really clearly about the need for really centralized information, referrals for support for both students and families, and as much transparency about our planning as we're moving forward. So we took this information and have began and developed a cross-departmental planning group called Student and Family Supports, and we've met several times. And our first task at hand was to develop that centralized, easy to access menu of student support supports by school that's supported in our six supported languages. And it's available on our website. We're also printing off many of those copies and making sure that as many people as possible know what's available, along with a description of what that means. You also heard about how we really got to test like what it would take to think about some level of in-person support through our process around childcare. As you recall, we said that we'd be implementing childcare in a phased approach. We did a lot of coordination and work with our partners who are licensed childcare providers, as well as our school sites, our entire operations team, to be able to make sure that we were doing this in a safe way, not only under the regulations that ODE has provided for us, but also the state regulations around childcare. And to date, we had hoped to be able to provide childcare in September, and the planning, we wanted to take a really cautious approach. And so on September 28th was the first phase of implemented childcare, where we opened up sites at Creston, Rigler, and Beach. And to date, Creston and Rigler are completely full, meeting that threshold for about 50% of the children who are being cared for, being able to qualify for subsidized childcare. We want to make sure that we're offering services for students and families with greater needs. And King and Beach still sort of ramping up around their enrollment. This Monday, so that would be yesterday, our second phase of James, John, Hayhurst, MLC, Vestal, and Winter Haven, they all opened up and are still continuing to enroll students. And then next Monday, we'll complete out with Irvington and Lent. So we went from about 9 schools to 12 schools being able to do that. And we are excited about the enrollment and the careful way that we've implemented. I want to do a special thank you to Whitney Ellersick, our Director of Nutritional Services, because all of our childcare sites receive free breakfast and lunch, as well as some of our providers are also purchasing snacks from Nutrition Services, because it both saves time and money. So we're really able to support these childcare sites. So we learned a lot from the childcare sites and have been working in really close partnership with Multnomah County in both the chair's office as well as the Sun Service System to develop family resource centers. And so over the weeks, we've been working really carefully with our operations team to think about all of the safety planning and precautions and how we could offer an array of services that meet the needs that have been expressed by our families around technology support, some academic tutoring, some access to basic needs, as well as some family case management and some potential behavioral health services. So as we were planning those, we want to make sure that we are coordinating really tightly with our operations team. We learned a lot from the childcare implementation, and we're trying to take that and make sure that we have a really well thought out, well planned, well coordinated cross-departmental planning process. And the other thing that we're really trying to make sure that we're doing is we're taking a really cautious approach so that we can build confidence of folks to be able to provide limited in-person supports. So these are going to be at only 5 sites. We want to make sure that they're only open at most one to 2 days a week after school hours, so that we're really limiting exposure and limiting exposure, and also making sure that we're following all of the proper safety protocols. And this level of work and coordination, as you can imagine, is taking quite some time and taking a lot of effort. But were it not for all of the partners who've been involved who really talk about how much this is needed, in that we have a lot of folks who want to be able to get eyes on kiddos and families, make sure that everyone's feeling safe, and be able to make sure that they're connected to resources in person, so that it might be able to make sure that that the connection virtually is also happening. So we're taking this really cautious approach. We're continuing to do planning. And we're doing this in a way that we think is as responsive as possible to the express needs that our community has been talking about what they need. So we'll continue to keep you updated on this planning and let you know as implementation draws nearer. I think we're going to do questions now.
So this is Ailey. I just want to say, Ms. Ledesma, as you were talking there and talking about what you learned from the preschool implementation, I just so appreciate being able to say, like, this did not go as planned and we learned some things. And I also wanted to lift up Dr. Bird, that you did the same thing around the middle school questions. And I saw in the Oregonian where you said, you know, things were fuzzy and this is my responsibility. And so I just really appreciate the culture at PPS where we talk about that we're a learning institution and we're actually living into now claiming when there's something that doesn't go smoothly and saying what we've learned from it. And so I think that that's one of the huge cultural shifts I've noticed in PPS is sort of this ability to say, like, hey, preschool didn't roll out, didn't go as we planned. And hey, there was a miscommunication with middle schools around what the intentions of the schedule were. And we own that and we learn from it and we move forward. And I just think that that is such an embodiment of what we're talking about, of our theories of actions, our sort of way of being a learning institution and continuing to always grow and improve. And so I just want to thank staff for modeling that and for living into this culture of PPS that Superintendent Guerrero is leading us through and the board is supporting. What other questions or comments do board members have for our team that shared tonight?
I was curious, you talked about the families that were most in need of the childcare, and how is most in need defined? I'm not sure. Are we applying? I'm sure we're applying a racial equity lens, but is it based on parents needing care, essential workers, income levels? How are we making those decisions?
Sure. So we did quite a bit of analysis in the site selection. We tried to offer both a geographic spread as well as doing an analysis of sort of like the students who would most likely be utilizing these efforts, and certainly had a racial equity lens on that. When I spoke about students most in need, it was shorthand for financial need. So the state offers subsidized childcare, and so those families, so that they're not paying the full price, they're actually sort of really de minimis cost so that they can access childcare.
Thank you.
Can I ask, and I apologies if I've missed this, can you say how many students, how many children are currently enrolled in these programs, and what the anticipated, like once everything's rolled out, what's the maximum capacity?
Yeah, so the maximum capacity would be for 12 sites, would be somewhere between 360 and 400 students. We had originally contemplated 9 sites, and so we were able to expand to 3 more sites. It's a guesstimate because some they're maxed out at 30 and some are maxed out at a little bit more. And then in terms of enrollment, so enrollment as of Friday, which is when our fabulous Nancy Hoth, who oversees childcare, was able to get a report to us. I believe that Creston and Rigler were at the max. King and Beach, I believe, had 5 and 10, but I'm at this point, I've got so many tabs open on my computer that I'm frantically trying to find my email where I have it pulled up. So if you don't mind, I can, if I may, I'll follow up. You know that, and it's changing. I think what we want to make sure that we're communicating to families is that there are still slots open, not only the sort of pay slots, but also the subsidized slots. And so with the exception of Creston and Rigler. So, and I'll get that to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask, well, actually, I'm going to go into a mini rant here. So, Ailey, cut me off when I've ranted enough.
Yeah, that's good.
Everybody wants, no, I haven't even started yet. Everybody wants schools to open. So much is dependent on schools being available for students to learn and families to get on with, the business of earning a living and maintaining sanity and all the rest of it. we cannot open the schools until the public health environment permits it safely, which means that everybody needs to be wearing masks and physically distancing with fidelity every nanosecond of every day. And it is, I mean, I've had to interact with the world more in the last few weeks than I have been. And, you know, I understand it's hard, but if you want the schools to open, that's what needs to happen. And I just want to note that there was a demonstration in Salem yesterday. A bunch of parents, I don't know how many, 100, couple hundred, gathered at the legislature to demand schools opening. And based on the footage I saw on the news last night, I saw three of those people wearing masks. Nobody was distancing. I mean, how do you not get this? If you want the schools to open, you cannot be doing that. You cannot be sitting around in bars drinking. It cannot happen. Life will not be normal until we're through the pandemic, and that's not going to happen for a good long time. So everybody needs to just do what we need to do. I'm done. Thank you.
I would also add to that, Dr. Moore, wash your hands. I know that I was really good about washing hands at the beginning of the pandemic, so much that my skin was a little chapped. And now my skin is back to being nice and soft because I have not been washing my hands enough. So I'm going to practice washing for 20 seconds like we're supposed to and doing that all the time. So invite others in the viewing audience to wash hands as well. I know we've got a little more of the presentation to continue. Are we ready for that, board, or do you have any more questions of this portion?
Real quickly, Director Moore, and actually anybody can go to kgew.com and you can see me talking about the economy and the, you know, where less than half the jobs have come back. And saying the exact same thing, I end my interview by putting on a mask and saying, you want the economy to come back? Wear a mask, socially distance. So just want to reinforce that. Thanks staff for all their work. We know from, and I do at some point want to hear about where we are with sports as part of reopening. And at this, recognize the importance of that. At the same time, seeing, you know, adults on professional football teams screwing up. So realizing the risks. So I just want to appreciate the staff taking real care in planning the opening of those centers, knowing the risks involved. Because you know we've seen examples of really well-intentioned efforts leading to this spread of the virus. So
apparently roller derby is the model
and all that stuff.
Yeah, apparently roller derby has an amazing model that other sports teams are now following.
Can I, before we shift, I just have a for Dr. Brown, and it's more of a contextual question or comparative question. It's on the slide that's the limited in-person instruction for specific groups of students. And I'm wondering, does Oregon have a more or less stringent than other states? You know, I know that, I mean, part of what's happening with parents, they're, you know, not only looking at what's happening in neighboring districts, but in neighboring states, in New York City, and you know, in Texas. And since we've sort of, we as a state have said, like, we're planting our flags on these health metrics. And I'm curious, because other people are like, yeah, but these guys are doing this, or that's happening there. Why can't we do it? Are the metrics more stringent, or are they about in line with other places, or it varies jurisdiction by jurisdiction?
Well, thank you, Director Brim Edwards, for that question. yeah, clearly there is tremendous variability across the country in terms of how this is playing out. The metrics for the state of Oregon are actually fairly well anchored to CDC guidance. So CDC guidance has a set of thresholds for lower risk of transmission in schools that suggests that you should have a threshold someplace between 5 to 20 cases per 100,000, and with a testing rate below 5%. I believe there are only 5 or 6 states that are actually using metrics, clearly articulated metrics, as a way to inform decision making. You know, the silver lining in this for us is that our data, it appears that some of the work that's been done in this community in terms of social distancing, wearing masks, et cetera, which is much more ubiquitous here than in other parts of the country, appears to be reducing our incidence rates. And our incidence rates actually look good compared to some other states around the country, but are far higher than they were in Europe when European systems reopened schools. So, you know, the context here is we look good compared to the US. The US tends to look bad compared to everybody else. And again, the metrics that the state has chosen to anchor to are consistent, again, with the CDC guidance for lower risk of transmission in schools.
And then a follow-up. Obviously, to have confirmed cases, you have to have a set amount of testing. Is our testing sort of adequate to be able to, like, it's not that our numbers are, you know, X level because we actually haven't tested or that much, or we're testing a lot, or
that is a challenging question. I'm trying to be polite here. I think it's pretty evident that testing has not been performed in the U.S., and Oregon's really no exception, though I'm pleased to say that I think there's going to be an influx of testing to increase capacity here. The testing rates in our country have not been sufficient really to make contact tracing as effective as it could be. And so increasing the testing rates would certainly be helpful. And in the past 3 weeks, I believe it was 2-3 weeks, the state actually suspended the use of testing rates as part of the decision-making process because it got biased because of the wildfires and the impact of the wildfires and the smoke on people going to the doctor. So less than ideal situation.
So Chair Lowry, I think both Director Bailey's and Brim Edwards' questions are a nice segue to a couple remaining slides that speak to, you know, our considerations for limited in-person activity, including athletics, but as well as some of the safety considerations and some reference points that we're relying on.
This is Brenda Martnick, and thank you, Director Lowry, Chair Lowry, and Board of Directors and the Superintendent. I'm going to share with you the last couple of slides, which is in regards to limited in-person instruction and our next steps. So what I wanted to talk about is the ability for us to continue to offer additional opportunities for students to receive in-person engagement in academic and social emotional instruction. And as you can see, we have a number of pretty strict parameters if we are going to offer some limited in-person instruction under our comprehensive distance learning model, which is part of ODE's recommendations. As you've heard earlier, there's a lot of complexity in bringing students into schools, managing cohorts, numbers of students in building per week, safety protocols, and then the contact tracing. So one thing that we have to really consider is what is and is not a cohort. ODE has defined that for us. So we have to look at our cohort management. We also need to make sure that cohorts for teachers, which is 5 per week, is managed in addition to cohorts for students, which is 2 per week. We have a limit of 250 people per week in a building. And we also have to look at, in regards to what is or is not a cohort, we have to consider childcare, assessments, and busing. So there are many other examples and some key components that we have to consider. And one of them I mentioned was transportation, nutrition services. And within all of that, we still, our number one priority is to keep students safe, to keep our staff safe, and then also try to figure out how to engage our students with limited in-person activities and with limited in-person instruction. So next slide. So there are some very critical services that we have already begun doing with limited in-person instruction. Some of those are special education assessments, DIBELS assessments, and childcare. Now, what we have done is we have started providing some of those services, and we learn from how we're creating those smaller one-on-one or small group interactions. What we want to do, again, as Danny had referenced, is we want to build the confidence in our staff and our families, and we want to also reduce the anxiety of being able to provide services in a healthy and safe way to reduce or mitigate the possible exposure of COVID. So as we've continued to provide these services, we have worked out safety procedures, contact tracing, social distancing, and now we're at a point to begin some other engagement activities and instructional opportunities. So one thing that the superintendent mentioned was athletics. And one specific example that I want to talk about is high school athletics. We know that especially for our high school students, sports are important. We also know that for many student athletes, engaging in school through sports is a primary way to keep students connected and engaged in their learning. So I want to be clear, safety for our students, again, is our number one priority. Therefore, our first steps in regards to athletics is going to be a small but an important step. It's more closely aligned to some strength and fitness training by teams as opposed to team practices. So we're not going to put on helmets or shoulder pads and actually have practices per se, but we are going to get students out and start engaging by teams in some physical activity. We've already begun some extremely important limited in-person activities, and this is one more way for us to offer engagement opportunities for students, to offer outdoor team sports and fitness training that will continue as the weather gets worse. Football players and soccer players don't care if they're practicing in the rain. So to summarize, high school fitness teams, we will engage in activities that will be limited to fitness-focused training. They won't be regular practices. We will ensure that activities take place exclusively outdoors during one of our 4 time slots during the day and evening. Students will be masked at all times, will be distanced from each other, and will be grouped into cohorts that'll remain constant for 1 week at a time. We will be following all of our ODE guidelines for safety. These outdoor activities will also carry the benefit of not triggering the same cohort requirements as indoor programs do. So we can go ahead and offer these outdoor activities for that engagement and those key connections, and we can still continue to provide limited in-person instruction indoors. So finally, our hope is that we're going to be able to make some sort of an announcement in regards to athletics within a week, hopefully. We expect that we'll be able to use this similar model to also introduce activities such as our performing arts, choir, band, and then I also want to get into limited in-person instruction. So planning for academic instruction is more complex due to the additional parameters. We're underway in some of that planning through meetings with our principals, our district leaders, and we're developing a plan to include other stakeholders with some engagement. We want to have teachers and principals in the planning and implementation process. Some areas that we are thinking about right now are in regards to our early learners, including our younger students with disabilities and our students who are emergent bilingual. We also know that we need to look at credits and credit deficiencies for our juniors and seniors in high school. And then lastly, we know that those transition grades into 6th grade and 9th grade are crucially important. We are having some concerns around some students who are not engaging in instruction. And so we really want to try to plan around how we can engage with those students and maybe bring them onto our premises. So those are the 3 areas that principals have prioritized, in addition to more global areas around engagement, social emotional learning, and trauma, and then foundational literacy skills. So our next steps, we've had our principal meeting. I'll be meeting with PAT tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be engaging in other labor unions. We will develop an engagement process because we do believe that we need multiple groups of stakeholders and parents to weigh in on this. We want to engage with other community stakeholders as we decide on specific services that are in buildings. And then our timeline, since the superintendent just announced tonight that we will continue in comprehensive distance learning through the 2nd quarter, we're hoping to continue to slowly bring additional opportunities for students to participate in limited in-person instruction on an ongoing basis. It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning, and it takes approval through ODE. We don't want to do this too quickly because we want to make sure that safety continues to be of the utmost importance for all of those that are involved. And I am done presenting, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions,
Brendan?
board members? Oh, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
With regard to athletics, would that just be high school, or are we thinking about middle school as well?
Currently, it would just be high school. We have discussed starting to include middle school. And so we first want to get high school up and running. We want to continue to do a slow and methodical process so that we can continue to understand the risk factors to perfect our contact tracing and make sure that we're limiting exposure. So we're going to do it slowly, but yes, middle school athletics is definitely on the table.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, can I just follow up on that question? So, because I was one of those students who like had to have lots of daily activity. Just in terms of middle schools, what would you see as a trajectory, or is it like months away, or it's just we have a limited time this fall where still outdoor activity is viable?
Right. We don't have a specific timeline, Director Brim Edwards. What we would love to do is to be able to open that up as soon as possible. We first want to get high school athletics up and running, and then as soon as that is happening and coaches are understanding their role and the role of all of the safety protocols, then we're going to start to roll out middle school. So I don't have a time frame for you. I am hopeful that it's before January, but I can't unfortunately give you a timeline at this point.
We certainly want to make sure that the community has a few places where they can reference important metrics. Russ, do you want to explain what each of these might tell families and our students who are interested in tracking it in the same way that we might be?
Yeah, we've added a couple links to this. There's some resources that have been there for a while. The top two resources, one links to a dashboard that was put up by Willamette Educational Service Center, and it gives a nice summary of all the metrics and our status, and actually you can look at other counties as well. And then the second link actually goes to the report from the Oregon Health Authority that again reports out on the metrics and gives those metrics over time and actually gives you a little bit longer view. And so those for those who are interested in tracking this and keeping an eye on how things are moving over time, those are two resources that members of the community could go to on a regular basis to see. Both are updated. The OHA numbers are updated every Monday. I'm not sure on the update cycle of the metric. It would have to come after the OHA.
Can I just say a word about athletics, restarting sports? I appreciate that sports and athletic activities are important to students, as are many other extracurricular activities. I'm going to be a voice for extreme caution in restarting athletics, and I'm going to trust that staff are going to exercise the same kind of caution that you've exercised to date on this. But I'm guessing you are receiving, I'm assuming, considerable pressure to restart athletic activities. And I want to lend my voice to those of us who want to stress the need for safety. I'm a baseball fan, and Major League Baseball, with essentially unlimited resources, daily testing, gold-plated everything, experienced some pretty epic fails, even in a very short season. We are not going to have any of those advantages. So if you need someone to speak up to defend unpopular decisions around athletics, call me.
Thank you, Director Moore. We are going to continue, as with all of the other activities or assessments or summer school. We're going to continue to follow very strict safety protocols, and we've been successful. We have put trainings in place and a lot of focus on how we get students there and staff there and how we return them as safely as possible back to their homes. And so that is and has been since March our first and most important priority, and it will continue to be. Life for our students and for our staff is the most important. And so that's what we will continue to prioritize. Thank you.
Brenda, who did you say that the district is consulting with on public health issues and public health guidelines around all these issues, all the risk assessments we're doing?
Yes. So we partner with Multnomah ESD, who is in consultation with Oregon Health Authority and with the CDC. So we've been in partnership with them. We also have a national health advisory panel that we meet with on a weekly basis. Our safety plans and ODE blueprints and our contact tracing logs and everything that we have developed has had to go through an approval process through Oregon Health Authority and through ODE. And then we've also run it through our health advisory panel as well. So we have multiple different points of contact for experts to be able to review our information to ensure that we're doing things as prescribed by the health professionals.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. And I think I just want to add my voice to Director Moore's, that public health has guided the district's decisions to date, and that is the most important principle. It's a value that the superintendent put out there right at the very beginning, and that the board supports as well. And I think that's true of everything we're talking about, whether it's reopening in a limited capacity or not reopening now until, you know, at least January. And it applies to band, it applies to sports, it applies to student, you know, clubs. And I just want to make sure, if there is a creative way, and it sounds like you're thinking very creatively about getting teams back together, socially distanced in a safe environment that the public health officials had said, yes, that's okay. That's wonderful. And I think that's a great thing. But I want to make sure we are willing to push back on the pressure that is coming, you know, and really, to be honest with the community, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There are lots of things that are important. Graduation was important, prom was important. Those students missed that. We didn't hold those events because of the dangers. It's possible that we'll miss fall sports, right? And it's possible it won't happen. And that is tragic. And we should do everything we can to support the students who are impacted by that negatively, but we should not feel pressured to take unnecessary risks that you see throughout the country, right? We are seeing schools do this. And I know Director Lowry doesn't want us to repeat things, but I'm also a sports fan. And I mean, these highly paid athletes who have been, you know, ensconced in bubbles in, you know, high-end hotels are still getting COVID, and they're still spreading it to other teammates, and we're still canceling games. So it is hard for me to imagine that for at least the near term that we would be able to go back to anything resembling actual games, practices, you know, competition. But however, I do fully support what you're doing so far, and I appreciate the presentation today, because I appreciate that creativity that you're applying to it and the public health lens. So thank you.
And I would like to say that it's not that Director Lowry doesn't want us to repeat ourselves. It's that the will of the board, as expressed at our board retreat, was that we all recognize we repeat one another, and we would like some accountability around that. But sure, you can blame me. That's fine. I'm happy to raise that up. I was going to ask Director Moore how the Red Sox were doing, as she brought up baseball, but that just seems mean. So we will.
Indeed, it is.
So can I shift into the topic? And I guess I just want to say, I don't think anybody who asked about athletics was, especially since it just followed a long conversation about the health metrics and that we're sitting with them. It wasn't in the context of, throw out the health metrics for athletics. So just to be clear, I think there are lots of our students who this is their outlet, and it's a question that we get asked, and it's good that we have an answer. But I don't think anybody was saying throw out stick to the metrics for schools, but not for athletics. So I have a question: if we're shifting now to comprehensive distance, if we're staying in the comprehensive distance learning model through the next quarter. One of the things that I'm seeing in a lot of different school communities and in parent groups is like everybody's hiring tutors to supplement the sense that, kids are falling behind, and if people have resources, they're sort of supplementing into what the district is providing. And I'm interested in sort of what our equity point of view is on that, because clearly the people who can do that are people with the resources. Two resources: one, to be able to find somebody to teach those classes or to teach a subject, and then two, the financial resources to pay them outside of the system. So I'm, again, from an equity standpoint, curious kind of what our point of view is on that, and how as a system we can push in and try and provide equitable opportunities to our students in what's a pretty challenging environment.
Yes, thank you for that question. We are looking in multiple ways of how we are supporting students through equitable ways. In Danny's presentation earlier tonight around the Family Resource Centers, around our childcare in regards to special ed assessments, engagement through high school athletics. There's a variety of different ways. And then the next set of ways that we're looking at how we're going to be able to provide some really quality limited in-person instruction is with maybe our early learners, students who are having trouble engaging, and then also looking at what schools those would be at. Are we considering our CSI schools? Are we considering different schools in different quadrants of the district? So a lot of those questions haven't been answered yet, but racial equity and social justice and our theory of action is always at the forefront of all of our discussions. And as I talked about from when I started presenting back in March, we're really guided by our guiding principles, which really focuses around our strategic plan. So all of those things are influencing our decisions.
And if I could add, I think so I think one way that we're encouraging our community to sort of like to use the racial equity lens around sort of like the availability of services is that I think that we wanted to be as transparent as possible about the wide array of services that are available at every school. And so I think one of the things that we had to do was some community education, because I think what I heard in talking with parents and talking with friends of mine who were sort of like, do we do, what do we do? What do we need to do? Is that there wasn't going back to that place, a transparent way for folks to see what actually is available. And so we, with a lot of cross-departmental work, we laid out school by school an array of services and supports that are there. So at the very least, parents can make informed decisions about what their students may need in addition to that's already there. But if you look across all of the schools, you can see that we have sort of really prioritized our schools, our CSI schools, our TSI schools. And then we also have additional supports around that are culturally specific. So as a system and as a district, we've really tried to be transparent about that level of prioritization as well as the wide array of services. And so if parents are looking for additional resources, we want to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's like informed. And also, I think what we've committed to is as we listen to parents and as we listen to a lot of the testimony is to try to be responsive. We're consistently looking for where might there be gaps and how do we fill those gaps? And so that's something I literally just got off the phone. That is something that we're trying to figure out in terms of the Family Resource Centers as well, as sort of like what's not being done virtually that needs to be done in person in a very limited way, and how do we make sure that that's available for our community of schools, and do it in a really targeted way that's well coordinated and that we're collaborating not just with what's happening internally but across our community.
So
I'm gonna just put a pause here. We've been going for about 90 minutes. We're about 15 minutes beyond sort of our scheduled agenda time, and we have some more. We've got a few reports left tonight. So I wanted to ask, is it the will of the board this conversation right now? And if so, let's take a brief break and then we can come back to conclude this conversation and do our reports. Or would you rather wrap up this conversation and go straight into our reports to close our meeting?
I prefer to wrap up and go.
Okay, so your choices are wrap up and go to reports, or continue.
Director Scott.
You're with Director Scott. So I've got 2 for wrap up and go to reports. Anybody else?
I have one short question.
I'll be right up if I get my question answered.
So we've got 2 people who have questions.
Just one.
Okay, well, Scott, Director Bailey has a question and Julia has a question. Okay, so let's take a 2-minute break. Everybody stand up and stretch, and we'll come back and we're better, especially going into hour 4 of a meeting for some of us if we've had a chance to stand up and move. So I'm going to ask my board colleagues to think about, are your questions things that we need to ask tonight here on the record, or are they things you can email and get answers to? So I think, Julia, you said you had a question you needed to answer, and Dr. Bailey, you had a brief question. So Julia.
You cut out.
Bailey, you cut out, but I think she said, Julia, go ahead.
Okay. So it was a follow up to the broader question, but I'm just sort of trying to take it down to a practical level for continuing and comprehensive distant learning. So say you're a parent of a 4th grader that's not reading by benchmark. What's happening? The synchronous and asynchronous is not working. Where is that parent going to go for, say, reading? Like a lot of parents with resources would go get, reading tutoring on their own. Is it they're going to that family resource center? And if so, where do they find where that is? And how do they access that? I'm just trying to think from a parent standpoint,
Right. Thank you. Dr. Bird, do you want to just mention a little bit in regards to the schedules and how students are set up to get some tiered supports?
So yeah, thank you, Director Brim-Edwards. And that's why the schedules are set up the way they are, in that there's some time for whole group instruction, there's time built in for small group instruction, and then time for asynchronous learning. So and we saw this with the middle school example, that there was definitely some misunderstanding and some miscommunication on my part, but that was for sure, that's when, if students are having difficulty, that's exactly why we built in time for teachers to choose to have small groups rather than large groups. So rather than whole groups, so that they can differentiate instruction for students. And so I would say, if to answer your question directly, if you're a parent and your child is experiencing problems, then the first place you go to is the teacher. And if it doesn't get resolved that way, then you go to the principal, and then of course the area senior director after that. But there are built-in sort of safety nets in those schedules for students to get additional help that need it. And that's why they were designed the way they were designed, was with those children in mind.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Director Brim-Edwards, hi, this is Craig. We're also going to be relaunching teacher-recommended supplementary contracted tutoring services for our homeless and migrant students. And we're starting to also explore Title III funding for our English language learners. That's something that's starting to come together. And once we start to have some more definitive information on that, I'll make sure I send you and the board an email with updated information around some of those wraparound supports.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for bringing that up, Director Brim-Edwards. That was one of the questions that we talked about this summer in the planning groups, was the kids who just don't take to online. But my question is real brief. Brenda, you talked about the minor fall sports, football and soccer. You left out the most important, and I'm not sure why, fall sport, cross country. And great article, by the way, I'd Coach Mark Cotton this week, who was my coach. But fantastic person. But what is cross country? What's the status of that in terms of the type of conditioning going on?
So what we will be doing is it is going to be by teams, but it's going to be more like strength and agility, some physical fitness activity. So it's more around fitness training as opposed to specialized sports related activities. So even if it's cross country or the football team or soccer or lacrosse, they're going to get some similar types of speed and agility training and other things like that, where we will be able to reduce the contact limit the social interactions or touch or anything like that, limit access and touching of footballs and soccer balls and things like that. So, sorry, my cat has decided to enter. So we will be able to provide those opportunities for all students, including students who are on the cross-country team.
I hope we can send some of the football players like on a little training run to the top of Rocky Butte.
I will certainly suggest that.
Right. Any other questions of Dr. Brown or the rest of the team before we move on to our committee reports? Okay, thank you so much. We've got a couple of reports from committees. My internet decided to completely crash. I think family members are using it. So I need to pull my script back up, but I know that off the top of my head that Director Moore had a policy committee meeting on Monday. So Director Moore, do you have anything to share from that policy committee meeting?
We are working on developing a list of priorities for policies that we're going to be tackling this year. We have a very, very long list. It is highly unlikely that we're going to be able to do all of them. So we're going to be, hopefully by the next meeting, we will clarify a short list of things, of policies that we're going to focus on. The next meeting is on the 26th, and I'm hoping that we will get back to looking at the real estate policy and the, what's the other one? Liz, can you help me? What's the other policy that the complaint policy that we're going to be revising, or at least considering revision? That's it. Thanks.
Great. Director Scott, did you have anything to report from your intergovernmental committee, your intergovernmental relations team?
Yes, we had our first meeting of the Intergovernmental Committee, the IGC, on September 28th. We got an update on legislative committee days and the state revenue forecast. And then we spent a good chunk of time talking about the 2021 draft legislative agenda. We sort of took the 2019 legislative agenda and talked through that and what we might want to update. Next steps on that, Courtney's going to get ideas from the senior leadership team. It will come to the board for approval in November. And we also gave direction to staff to collaborate with other districts and the OSBA from a legislative agenda standpoint. And then the other thing the committee did was talk about potential topics that we'll take on this year. And so in addition to the legislative agenda, we talked about working with our partner jurisdictions. We talked about criteria for board resolutions in support of other governments or ballot measures. And then really importantly, at the end, Director Brim-Edwards reminded us of the Reimagine Oregon effort and the fact that school districts have not been super involved, and yet education is a big function of that. And so I know Director DePass is currently a liaison for the restorative justice work that the state and Multnomah County are doing. But Portland Public Schools will and should be involved in other aspects of Reimagining Oregon to address anti-Black racism in the state. And so we'll need to just be keeping up to speed on that and figuring out how we're going to be involved and continue to play in that conversation. Next meeting is on October 22nd.
Great. And Director DePass, would you like to share some of that conversation you had with the restorative justice team that's working on some of the Reimagine Oregon pieces?
Sure. So if you're not familiar, you can look up the website for Reimagine Oregon. That's a list of policy demands that have been sourced from 3 different research projects that happened from, I believe, 2015 through 2018. The State of Black Oregon, that was published by the Urban League of Portland, Multnomah County's State of Black Oregon, and the Portland African American Leadership Forum have all published reports about the state of Black Oregonians, specifically in Portland. This policy demand kind of website document, living document, is culled from those published pieces. there's nothing new in those policy demands. They're policy demands that have come up time and time again. Commissioner Jayapal at Multnomah County is convening on behalf of Multnomah County, but this is a multi-jurisdictional effort. It involves the city of Portland, Multnomah County, Washington County, Clackamas County, and the state. And so I'd like to just share, we've just had a kickoff meeting this week. We're planning to meet again, and we should probably coordinate Director Scott on our on how we proceed, and I'll make sure to follow up. Danny on the staff side was able to attend our meeting Monday, and it was a good start.
Awesome. Are there any other committee reports from board members? Okay.
I could say a few words about enrollment balancing.
Okay.
So I want to reiterate what Superintendent Guerrero said earlier, that in the Southeast, there is an initial springboard proposal, is what they're calling it, which is kind of a first draft to throw out to our community coalition to develop a plan. And I just want to emphasize, it's a real delicate dance to have staff bring a proposal out when we're encouraging at the same time a community-based solution. And want to emphasize that that proposal is not adequate. It is not an endpoint. There are, for example, it doesn't balance high school enrollment nearly enough. And Mr. Merrill talked about that in his testimony earlier about, I believe is referring to Madison enrollment. So it's a starting point to get the conversation going and not an ending point at all. So I'd encourage committee members and the public to look at it critically, and I mean positive critical, and to keep looking at things from different angles, ask the hard questions, and push us to define the best solution. At the same time, there are some definite limitations in terms of the buildings that are there in Southeast. And that's just a given on the ground. So I just wanted to lay that out there. I'm encouraged that we've at least got a starting point. I think committee members have asked a number of good questions that staff are responding to. And again, I'm just really glad we're taking this on and looking forward to seeing what the committee comes up with.
All right, thank you, Director Bailey. All right, if there's nothing else, we have Katrina Doherty here, with us, who is on the ESD board, and she is running for OSBA board, and so she wanted to share a couple of words with us tonight. Thanks, Katrina, for being here and for experiencing PPS board fun. Katrina works in public health, so I know she was interested in a lot of what we had to talk about tonight. So Katrina, thank you.
Yeah, I will keep it very short. You guys have had a very long meeting, and I am impressed listening to all of it. You guys really get into the weeds, drill down, do a lot of good work, and I'm sure have a lot of tireless hours here. So thank you for all you do. Again, I'm Katrina Dowdy. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm an MESD school board member, so I heard you all mention us a few different times. And the main thing that I heard throughout this whole meeting is how vital public health is and how much public health needs to be involved in making sure our kids and our schools and our communities are safe. And that's why I decided to run for OSBA position 17 board. I feel like looking at the lineup of wonderful board members there are now, there seems to be a pretty significant lack in folks with public health or healthcare experience, and especially modern healthcare experience. So really understanding some of the health equities, the systemic struggles that our students have had that might be different from that of their parents in certain ways, whether that's technology gaps, whether that's, further pushing folks out of communities and gentrification, just a lot of different ways that our students are needing public health to advocate for them, keep them safe, and then push for policy change. So a few of the things that you've heard about recently that I've been working on is Universal Preschool Now, which will be on the ballot alongside your measure, which is very exciting, your bond. So hopefully we can get 2 yeses for our students, which would be very exciting, and a huge push for equity. And so I was a big part of that, developing both the school board member cohort and the public health cohort. And I just thought the next way to keep pushing for not just our region, but our whole state is to have that platform and really bring some public health expertise to OSBA. One thing and one reason my board nominated me is because I've been able to hop in just my year on being a school board and point out to OSBA some of their systemic issues, which is, you know, for example, they never ask about pronouns at any registration they have. They never offer it. I'm in fact the first person who has ever put on their application what their pronouns are. And I noticed that is a requirement that is normalized in your meetings. And you know that that is suicide prevention for our students. And so it's just no longer acceptable for OSBA to not do that. And so simple things like that, that make our students comfortable, that prevent harm to our students, and that really help promote equity, are changes that OSBA and all of our school boards can really be instructed firmly to do better. So that's some of my goals. My big focuses are, like I said, public health, really building that bridge, making sure that we can have stronger relationships, and getting us more active in some of the legislative and community action spaces. So there's a PowerPoint that was sent to you all for a day where you've had a little more sleep. But I just wanted to ask for your support and let you know this is me, this is who I am. Reach out anytime you have a friend on MESD.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, and good luck in your election.
Thank you.
Director Brim Edwards, you had one more thing you wanted to add, you said?
Yeah, I just have a statement that I'm going to submit for the record. So I'm just providing notice that I'm doing that for the earlier vote.
Okay. Any other business before we adjourn tonight? All right, we have agenda setting tomorrow at 11 a.m. So if you have something, if you're a board member and you have something to add for agenda setting, please email that to us before 11 a.m. tomorrow. And I hope everyone has a good evening tonight. Thank you all. We are adjourned, and our next meeting will be Tuesday, October 20th. Good night.
Good night, everybody.